Part 1. Coin City. Morning. The rules they never explained. Era. End of modern into the wasteland era. Year 22,147. October 1st. Pine Haveth woke up because the building made a sound it was not supposed to make. It was not loud, it was not even clear. Just a dull little shift through the floorboards, like a heavy truck had rolled over the street outside, or someone had leaned their weight against the wrong support beam in the stairwell. In Medwin, that was enough. He lay still with his eyes open, listening. He counted heartbeats without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. The room was dark, but it was never fully dark anymore. Moonlight came through gaps in boarded windows. A weak green glow bled in from the hallway because somebody, somewhere, had a battery lantern they left on all night. Across the room, Rose breathed in her sleep. Small breaths, steady. That steadiness was the only thing Pine trusted. Beside him, Lavi was awake too. She did not sit up fast, like she was afraid to spook whatever might be out there. Her hand slid under the thin blanket and found his wrist. A single squeeze. Their signal. You heard it. He squeezed back. I heard it. Lavi's voice was barely air. Street? Pine waited a beat, then whispered, Truck. Maybe. Lavi's fingers tightened. Too early. Everything's too early, Pine murmured. He meant it as a joke, but it came out flat. The kind of joke you say to keep your own mind from chewing on the worst ideas. Lavi rolled onto her side and looked toward Rose. Pine followed her gaze. Their daughter was a small bundle on the mattress they had dragged up the stairs last winter when the lower floors got damp and the mold started taking people's lungs. Rose slept curled in on herself, hood off for the night, hair loose, face turned toward the wall. She always turned toward the wall when she slept, like she was trying to hide even from dreams. Pine watched her for a long moment, then looked away before his throat tightened. Lavi whispered, We should go before it gets thick. Pine nodded. The market was safer in the early hours sometimes. Fewer bodies, fewer hands. Then again, fewer witnesses too. Medwin had a way of making every choice feel like a gamble. Lavi sat up and swung her feet to the floor. The boards were cold. She winced quietly, not because of the cold, but because she had bruises that never fully went away. A bruise on her hip from a fall 2 weeks ago when a stair gave out. A bruise on her shoulder from a shove in a ration line. Her body carried the city the way walls carried soot. She reached for the folded scarf on the crate by Rose's bed. Pine's voice tightened. Let her sleep 5 more minutes. Lavi paused, scarf in hand, and looked at him. Her eyes were tired but sharp. We do that, we lose 5 minutes we might need. Rose stirred anyway, as if she could hear their arguing without hearing it. Her eyelids fluttered. She blinked once, then twice. Her face tightened, that little shift from child to survivor. Morning, Rose said, voice scratchy. Lavi's tone softened instantly, not fully soft, never fully soft anymore, but softer. Morning. Rose pushed herself up on her elbows. Her hair fell into her face. She brushed it away and yawned, a big normal yawn that belonged in a normal world. Then the distant crack of gunfire snapped somewhere far off, and the yawn died in her throat. Rose's shoulders rose tight. Was that close? Pine forced his voice calm. Far, stay calm. Rose did not look calm. She looked at him like she wanted him to tell her the truth and also wanted him to lie. She had learned that feeling young. Lavi knelt by her and held out the scarf. Arms up. Rose sighed. It was a kid sigh, annoyed and dramatic. Then she did what she was told. Lavi wrapped the scarf around her neck and pulled it higher than most people would. Pine watched Rose's ears disappear under cloth, watched the fabric press them down flat in a way that would make any other parent flinch. It always made him flinch. He never let it show. Rose grimaced. Too tight. Lavi loosened it a fraction, then tightened the knot again with practiced hands. It has to stay. Rose's eyes cut to Pine. Dad. Pine crouched in front of her. He put 2 fingers under the edge of the scarf and shifted it just enough that it did not pinch. His touch was gentle. His hands were big and rough, and he hated how delicate he had to be with this one thing, this one small piece of cloth that somehow mattered too much. "How's that?" he asked. Rose tested it with her chin. "Better." She hesitated, then asked, "Why do I have to wear it even inside the market? Everybody knows me." Lavi's jaw tightened. She glanced at Pine, and Pine felt the old familiar pressure of picking the right words. Pine said, "Because strangers don't know you." Rose frowned. "So?" "So strangers ask questions," Pine replied. Rose lifted her chin. "I can answer questions." Lavi's voice snapped sharper than she probably meant. "You don't." Rose blinked at her, startled. Lavi immediately pulled the edge back into herself. She touched Rose's cheek with her fingertips. "Rose, listen. It's a rule. You keep it up. You keep your hood up too." Rose's eyes narrowed. "Because you're scared." Lavi swallowed. For a second, her mask slipped. Not all the way. Just enough that Pine saw the panic underneath, the kind that lived in her bones now. Lavi said, "Because I love you." Rose rolled her eyes the way kids do when adults say something they cannot argue with. But the eye roll did not have the same weight it used to. There was fear behind it. Confusion, too. Rose was old enough to know there was something here she was not being told. Pine stood and moved to the crate near their bed. He pulled his coat on, then reached down into the space beneath the mattress and pulled out the tin. He did it fast but careful, like a ritual, like a prayer. Lavi watched him. Rose watched him too. Rose asked, "What's that?" Pine hesitated. He hated how much he hesitated. Kids could smell hesitation like smoke. "It's just our first aid," he said. Lavi added quickly, "Bandages." Rose leaned forward. "We have bandages." Pine popped the tin open with his thumb. Inside was bandage, yes. But there was also a small glass vial wrapped in cloth. Pine's fingers closed around it automatically, shielding it from view. Then he realized what he was doing and felt heat rise in his face. Rose's eyes sharpened. "That's not bandage." Lavi's hand touched Rose's shoulder. "It's for emergencies." Rose's voice dropped. "Am I sick?" "No," Pine said too fast. Lavi echoed, "No." The air in the room went tight. Pine hated that. He hated every moment that tightened the air around his daughter. He closed the tin and sealed it with the cloth wrap, then tucked it into the hidden inner pocket Lavi had sewn into his coat. He felt the hard shape press against his ribs. The weight was small. The meaning was heavy. "Boots," Pine said, turning it into a task. Tasks were safer than questions. Rose pulled her boots on and laced them. Lavi packed the small bag with coin, cloth, and the sack they used for food. Pine checked the knife at his waist. He checked it again. Then he checked that Rose's scarf still covered her ears. Rose caught him staring. "Stop checking," she muttered. Pine tried to smile. "I'm making sure you're dressed." Rose made a face. "I am." Lavi stood and tugged her own coat on. She pulled gloves over her hands, even though the room was not that cold. Rose noticed. "Why gloves?" Lavi answered without thinking, "Keeps your hands clean." Rose frowned. "My hands are clean." Lavi's eyes flicked to Pine again. Pine felt that signal between them, the one that always hummed under their lives. "Don't talk about it." Lavi changed direction. "Let's go early. If we're fast, we come home with more." Rose grabbed the bag strap like she wanted to be useful. Pine let her carry it, even though he knew he would take it the moment the crowd got thick. Let her be a kid for 10 minutes. Let her feel strong. They stepped out into the stairwell. The building they lived in used to be an office block. Pre-war, it was probably boring. Now it was a vertical village, full of families stacked on top of each other, with stairs that creaked and hallways that smelled like old cooking oil and damp laundry. Someone had painted a line on the wall near the second-floor landing, a crude coin symbol with a crown over it, a statement of loyalty. Right next to it, someone else had scratched a different symbol, half hidden under grime. Pine recognized it. Old Halvareth mark, faded, almost worn away by time. He stared at it for a heartbeat too long. Lavi noticed. Her voice came quiet. "Don't." Pine tore his eyes away and kept moving. On the first floor, a door cracked open. An older woman peered out, hair wrapped in a rag, eyes sharp in the dim light. Her name was Merrill. Pine had fixed her window latch last month. She had paid him in soup and 2 bullets. "You going out?" Merrill whispered. Pine nodded. Market. Maryl's gaze slid to Rose. It lingered on the hood and scarf, not cruelly, just long enough that Lavi's body shifted, stepping slightly between Maril and Rose. Maril leaned closer, lowering her voice. Be careful today. I heard talk. Lavi's face tightened. Talk about what? Maril hesitated like she regretted opening her mouth. Then she said it anyway. Health crew. Screening. Pine felt Lavi's grip on Rose's spike. Rose asked, screening like the movies. Maril stared at Rose for a moment, as if she had not heard a kid say the word movies in years. Then she looked away, jaw working. Screening like they line people up and check them, she said. Sometimes they help. Sometimes they don't. Lavi's voice went sharp. Check them for what? Maril's eyes flicked up the stairwell, wary. Fever, they've been whispering about some kind of sickness again. They change the name depending on who wants to scare who. Rose's brows knit. Sickness? Maril's gaze slid back to Rose's scarf. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Her silence said plenty. Pine said, Thanks for the warning. Maril nodded once, then added quieter, Keep her covered. People talk. People think they know things. They get hungry about it. Rose stiffened. About what? Lavi's hand tightened on Rose's wrist. About nothing, she said, too quick. Maril's door eased shut. They stepped outside. The street smelled like last night's rain and old smoke. Puddles filled the broken dips in the road, reflecting crooked power lines and the jagged edges of shattered windows. A dog limped past, ribs visible, tail low, eyes skittish. It kept its distance from people now. People did not feed dogs unless the dog had a job. A truck went by at the end of the block, moving fast, tires splashing water. Pine watched it until it turned and vanished. A man sat in the passenger seat with a rifle across his knees, eyes scanning like a machine. Rose hugged the bag strapped to her chest. Why is everyone moving like that? Pine answered without thinking. Because the day's already bad. Lavi shot him a look. Pine softened his tone. Because people are scared, he corrected. And when people are scared, they rush. Rose looked up at the grey sky. The clouds were low and heavy, pressing down on the city like the city had done something wrong. The World Defense Force will save us, right? She asked again. This time she did not sound practiced. She sounded like she was trying to grab something solid before it fell away. Pine's chest tightened. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to give her a clean answer that would let her sleep again at night. He heard the distant gunshots again. Crack, 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 far away but constant. He said, Maybe. I hope so. Rose's face crumpled for a second. You don't know? No, Pine admitted. Lavi leaned down, speaking near Rose's ear like a secret. The Knights are here. They're real. If you ever get separated, you find the dark armor. You understand? Rose stared at her mother. Why would I get separated? Lavi held Rose's gaze hard. Because the world is rough. Pine added quietly. And because there are people who would like to take what we have. Rose frowned. We don't have anything. Pine did not answer. He could not say, We have you. We have blood. We have a secret the wrong person would sell for a sack of coin and a warm meal. They walked faster. As they moved toward the market ward, the city got louder. More people, more voices, more movement. The early hush was gone. Now it was a constant scrape of life trying to keep up with danger. A patched sedan rolled by, one headlight working, the other dead. The back window was plastic. The driver's shoulders were hunched like he expected something to fall on him. The radio inside crackled, loud enough that it spilled into the street. Meadwin Coinwave Advisory. Curfew remains in effect. Knights deployed along the southern approaches. Citizens report sabotage. Citizens report suspicious movement. Static swallowed the next line. Then the voice returned, different now, edged with strain. Quarantine points active in the Lower Stone District. If you are ill, report to triage. Do not conceal symptoms. Levy's body tightened visibly. Rose noticed. Rose asked, Mom, are you sick? Levy forced a laugh that didn't sound like her. No. Pine's voice came low. Just keep your scarf up, that's all. Rose's eyes narrowed. Why does everyone care about sickness so much? People always cough. Pine's brain flashed to the rumor Marl had whispered, to words that lived in the city like a curse. Elf sickness, elf fever, 99 out of 100. He kept his voice even. Some sickness spreads fast. Rose asked, "Is it the kind that kills you?" Lavi's hand squeezed Rose's. "Don't ask that," she said, too sharp, then softened immediately. "Rose, don't put that in your head." Rose looked down. Her voice came out smaller. "I just want to know." Pine wanted to tell her. He wanted to explain everything, because secrets were heavy and he was tired of carrying them. But he had seen what people did when they thought they found something rare. He said, "We'll talk later." Rose's lips pressed into a line. She did not like that. She accepted it anyway, because she had learned that later sometimes meant never, and you lived with that. They entered the market ward as the morning fully woke. The old covered market hall had collapsed years ago, leaving exposed ribs of metal arching over the space like the skeleton of a dead beast. Vendors set up beneath those ribs, tarps stretched between broken pillars. Boards were nailed up to create stalls. People stood in lines that bent and twisted around debris. The market smelled like boiled roots and sweat, like smoked meat and cheap fuel. It smelled like damp cloth. It smelled like metal because even food sellers kept ammo nearby, and gun oil carried a particular sharpness that cut through everything. Pine's shoulders tightened the moment they stepped in. He hated crowds. Crowds hid hands. Crowds hid faces. Crowds swallowed children. He put his hand on the small of Rose's back and kept it there, not gripping, guiding. A constant reminder, "You're here." Rose leaned into that touch without thinking. Lavi moved on the other side of Rose, making a wedge of them. Pine in front, Lavi at the flank, Rose in the middle. Their formation was automatic now. It made Pine sick that it was automatic. They stopped at a window stall where a man with a grey beard and a missing thumb measured grain on a battered scale. "Pine," the man said, voice low, "early." "Had to be," Pine replied. The man's eyes slid to Rose's hood. He did not stare. He was careful with his gaze. Pine appreciated that. Pine said, "Beans, grain, salt if you've got it." The man snorted. "Salt's for people with luck." He scooped grain into a sack anyway. "Beans I can do." Pine slid coins through the slot in the board, copper, then silver. The man weighed them and nodded. The sacks came back through the slot, tied tight. Lavi tucked them under her coat immediately. Rose watched the exchange like it was a magic trick. "That's it?" she whispered. "That little sack costs that much?" Lavi murmured, "That's the world now." Rose bit her lip. They moved to the next stall. A cloth seller with a torn ear and eyes that missed nothing laid out fabric like it was treasure. "You want the strong weave," the woman said quietly to Lavi. "The kind that doesn't tear." Lavi's fingers pressed into the fabric, testing it. Pine watched her hands. He saw the tiny tremor she tried to hide. Lavi asked, "How much?" The price was high. Lavi paid without arguing. Rose stared. "Mom, why are you buying that? We already have cloth." Lavi's answer came too fast. "For repairs." Rose frowned. "Repairs to what?" Pine cut in, trying to keep Rose from digging. "To everything," he said. "Everything breaks." Rose did not look satisfied, but she let it go. For now. A shout rose nearby. Two men argued over a strip of dried meat. One accused the other of cheating. The other lifted his shirt to show a pistol tucked into his belt. The argument died instantly. That was Meadwin too. Coin kept things civil until weapons reminded people what was really in charge. Rose's eyes tracked the pistol. "Dad, do you have one?" Pine shook his head. "No." Rose asked, "Why not?" Pine's jaw tightened. "Because a gun costs more than we can spare." Levi added quietly, "And because guns bring attention." Rose whispered, "But the knights have guns." "The knights have armor too," Pine replied. "We have you." Rose blinked, then looked away as if unsure what to do with that. They moved deeper into the market. The crowd thickened. People brushed past. Rose's breath got faster. Pine kept his hand on her back. Lavi's fingers stayed locked around Rose's hand. A man nearby traded a wedding ring for 3 cartridges and a strip of meat. Rose watched him with wide eyes. Rose whispered, That ring meant something. Pine answered, "So does surviving." Rose swallowed hard. A car rolled past the edge of the market, rattling like it might fall apart at any moment. The radio inside played a bright pre-war song for a few seconds, a silly tune with a cheerful beat that sounded like a lie. Then the music cut to emergency band again.
Medwin Coinwave Emergency Advisory. Market ward remain calm. Report suspicious movement. Knights are deployed. Do not gather at quarantine points unless directed.
Static hissed. The voice returned, strained.
Reports indicate insurgent movement in outer streets. Repeat, insurgent movement. Shelter if you hear gunfire.
The car accelerated, leaving exhaust and radio hiss behind.
Rose's head snapped toward Pine.
Insurgents like Ashkarth?
Pine's body went still for a fraction of a second. He did not like his daughter saying that name in public. Names carried danger. He answered.
Maybe.
Rose's voice trembled.
Are they coming here?
Levy's grip tightened.
Rose, keep your head down.
Rose's fear sharpened into anger, the way fear sometimes did in kids who couldn't run.
Why do you always say that?
Levy's voice went low and fierce.
Because I want you alive.
Rose stared at her mother, shocked by the intensity. Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away hard, like she was ashamed to cry in public. Pine felt something twist in his chest. He wanted to kneel down and hug her and tell her it would be fine. Instead, he scanned rooftops again. Far down the street, on a rooftop, he saw a silhouette in dark armor, a Medwin knight. The figure stood still against the grey sky, watching the market like a statue that could move when needed. Rose saw it too. Her breath hitched, hope flickering.
Knights, she whispered.
Levy's eyes followed. She exhaled a tiny breath, then caught herself and went tense again. Rose tugged on Lavy's sleeve.
We're safe. They're right there.
Levy's mouth opened, then closed. She chose the only honest answer she could manage.
We're safer, she said.
Rose looked up at the night silhouette again, like she wanted to burn the image into her mind. Pine leaned in and murmured,
Stay close. Don't wander.
Rose nodded quickly. They turned down a narrow tarp corridor where the light dimmed and the air smelled damp. The passage walls were boards nailed up to form stalls, some painted with old shop names you could barely read. One board still had a faded sign, Bank of Medwin. The irony made Pine's jaw tighten. Halfway down the corridor, Rose noticed posters nailed crookedly to a plank wall. Fresh paper, dark ink, a quarantine notice. Screening today in the Lower Stone District. Report symptoms. Submit to checks. Someone had scribbled over it with charcoal. They check for fever. They take who they want. Rose leaned closer, reading slowly. She stumbled over a word, then got it. Rose asked,
Mom, why would they take people?
Levy's face went hard.
Don't read that.
Rose frowned.
I can read.
Pine's voice came sharp without meaning to.
Eyes forward.
Rose flinched. Pine immediately softened his tone.
Rose, please, just keep moving.
Rose swallowed, confusion and fear mixing.
What fever?
Levy's fingers tightened on Rose's hand, so hard Rose made a small sound of pain. Levy realized and loosened her grip, but her voice stayed strained.
Just sickness, she said. People get sick. They panic.
Rose asked, quietly now.
Is it the sickness that kills elves?
The words slipped out like Rose didn't even know why she said them. Like she had heard them somewhere in a hallway, through a cracked door, in the way adults whispered when they thought kids couldn't hear.
Levy froze.
Pine froze too. His blood went cold. Rose blinked at their faces.
What?
She asked, suddenly scared she had done something wrong.
I heard someone say it once. Is it real?
Levy's lips parted. No sound came out at first. Her eyes flicked around the corridor, checking who might have heard. Pine stepped closer, placing his body between Rose and the flow of strangers. Levy finally whispered,
Rose, you don't say words like that out loud.
Rose's face crumpled.
Why? What does it mean?
Pine's mind raced. He could not answer that here. He could not answer it with people's ears nearby. He could not even say the word elf in this corridor without feeling like he had painted a target on his daughter. He said, "Later." Rose's eyes filled again. "You always say later." Levy's voice broke just slightly. "Because later means alive." Rose stared at her mother, then looked down. Her small shoulders tightened under her coat. They moved faster. The corridor opened into a wider market space beneath the exposed metal ribs of the old hall. The crowd was thicker here, voices louder. Bodies pressed close. Pine's hand returned to the small of Rose's back. Levy moved closer on the other side. Rose's breath came shallow. She clutched the bag strap with both hands. Pine leaned down and asked softly, "You okay?" Rose nodded too fast. "Yes." He could tell she was lying. He let it go because he didn't have room for a breakdown in a crowd. A dull thump rolled through the city again. Deeper this time, like a heavy impact far away. People paused, eyes flicking toward the south. A woman muttered, "Artillery again." A man replied, "Or something worse." Then bargaining resumed, louder than before, like people could drown out fear with noise. Rose whispered, "The World Defense Force will save us, right?" Pine's throat tightened. He did not want this question to become a chant Rose repeated until it turned into a bruise inside her. He said, "I hope so." Rose's eyes snapped up. "That's not yes." Pine's voice went low, almost angry, but not at her, at the world. "I can't promise you yes." Rose looked at him like the ground had shifted. "Then who saves us?" Levy leaned in, voice firm, eyes sharp. "We save you," she said. Rose swallowed. "The knights too?" "Yes," Pine said. "The knights too." Rose's eyes flicked toward the rooftop silhouette again, seeking comfort. Pine scanned the market edge. Something felt off. It was not a clear thing, just the way a couple of people moved against the flow. The way one man's coat hung too heavy. The way another kept his hands tucked too deep, too still. Pine's instincts rose like hair on a dog's neck. He pulled Levy close, with a subtle shift of his shoulder. Levy caught it instantly. "What?" she murmured. Pine did not answer right away. He watched. The crowd's sound changed. A small dip, like a wave drawing back before it breaks. Rose felt it too. Her grip on the bag strap tightened. "Dad?" she whispered. Then someone screamed. It was a short, shocked sound, like their voice snapped in half. The crowd rippled. People turned. People stepped back. And through the opening of bodies, Pine saw grey scarves. Not one. Several. Moving with purpose. Not shopping. Not panicking. Cutting through the market like they belonged there. Hands under coats. Eyes flat. Faces set in that particular way of people who had already decided they were going to hurt someone and did not care who saw. Ashkarthian insurgents. In the market ward, in the middle of Coin City, Levy's hand clamped around Rose's wrist, so hard Rose hissed. Levy leaned close to Rose's ear and whispered, trembling, "Head down, hood up, do not let go." Rose's voice shook. "Mom, what's happening?" Pine's body moved without him deciding. He stepped forward, placing himself between the grey scarves and his family. His hand slid toward the knife inside his coat, but he did not draw it yet. Drawing too soon could turn him into the first target. He scanned for the rooftop knight. The silhouette was still there. Too far. Rose's eyes widened. "What are the knights doing?" Pine did not look away from the scarves. He answered anyway, voice tight. "Trying to get here." The grey scarves pushed closer. The market began to break apart. Not all at once. First in little flinches. A man stepping away. A woman pulling her child back. Coins forgotten on a stall because fear was louder than hunger. Then the first gunshot cracked. The sound punched the air. Someone screamed again, longer this time. Bodies surged. Stalls tipped. Rose's world snapped from crowded to chaotic in a single breath. Pine grabbed Rose's shoulder and pulled her close. "Stay with me," he ordered, voice louder now, cutting through noise. Rose's eyes were huge above the scarf. She nodded, terrified. Levy's voice was low, fierce, almost a growl. "Rose, keep it up," she hissed, fingers tugging Rose's scarf higher, even as the crowd began to shove and push. Pine could feel the city tilting toward violence. He knew what came next, and he knew that if anyone saw what Rose really was, if anyone decided she was valuable, then the market was going to become a trap. He pulled his family toward the nearest narrow gap between stalls, searching for stone walls, for fewer angles, for a way out before the wave hit them full. Behind them, the grey scarves moved faster. The scream that started it all turned into a chorus, and the morning that had tried to be normal died in the open air of Coin City.
Part 2. The Taking. October 1st, year 22,137. The first gunshot did not sound like it belonged in a market. It sounded too sharp for a place that sold cloth and beans. Too clean, too final, like somebody took a hammer to a bell and then held the bell in your teeth so you felt it ring. Rose flinched so hard, her hood shifted. Pine's hand snapped up and steadied it, fingers rough but careful, tugging fabric back into place like a reflex that lived deeper than thought. "Down," Levy hissed, and it came out with a bite. Her voice was already changing into that voice, the one Rose only heard when something was truly wrong. It was not gentle, it was not patient. It was the voice of a mother trying to keep a child alive. The crowd reacted a half-second late, the way crowds always do. The mind hears danger first. The body catches up afterward. People froze, turned their heads, tried to locate the sound. A man holding a sack of turnips stood motionless, like he expected an explanation to arrive with the next breath. Then another crack split the air. Somebody screamed high and thin, and that scream gave everybody else permission to move. The market broke apart. It did not explode outward in one clean direction. It folded and twisted. People surged into stalls. People climbed over crates. A vendor shoved a whole basket of dried meat into his coat and ran. Someone tripped and went down, and for a moment, the crowd flowed over them like water, boots slipping on spilled grain. Rose's hand was still in Lavy's, but bodies slammed into them from both sides. Rose's shoulder hit a plank wall hard enough to sting through her coat. She gasped and tasted dust. "Rose," Pine said, right in her ear, voice loud enough to cut through the panic. "Stay with me." "I am," Rose yelled back, and her voice sounded small against the chaos. Levy pulled Rose inward, turning her body so Rose was more shielded by her coat and her arms. It was a practiced motion. Rose hated that it was practiced. Pine scanned quickly, eyes moving like a man checking angles in a fight. He did not look for exits the way a normal person would. He looked for choke points. He looked for the line where a knife could appear. He looked for where a rifle would come up. He saw them again through the shifting bodies. Grey scarves, 4, maybe 5, moving against the flow. Not running like terrified shoppers. Cutting forward like hunters in a stampede. Ashkarthian insurgents. They were close enough now that Pine could see details. One of them had a patchwork jacket with a tear on the sleeve and dried blood darkening the seam. One wore a scarf that was clean compared to the others, like it was new or stolen. Their faces were tight, focused, flat. No surprise, no fear. They were doing what they came to do. A third gunshot cracked, and this one punched into something solid nearby. A board splintered. A woman shrieked and ducked behind a crate, hands over her head. Rose felt the sound in her ribs. Pine grabbed the strap of the food bag Rose had been carrying and yanked it out of her hands. "Forget it," he snapped. "Move." Rose stumbled. as he pulled her forward by the back of her coat. Lavi kept pace, shoulder pressed to Rose's other side. They moved toward a narrow gap between a cloth stall and a boarded window shop, trying to slip into less crowded space. The gap was almost there. Then the crowd surged the opposite way and slammed into them. Rose's boots skidded, her scarf pressed tight against her throat. She choked on her own breath for a second, and panic flared bright and ugly. "The World Defense Force will save us, right?" she blurted, the words tumbling out without sense, like if she said them enough times, they would become true. Lavi's face twisted. "Rose, move your feet," she ordered. "Feet, feet, feet." Pine forced his body between Rose and the direction of the grey scarves, using his shoulders like a wall. His hand slid inside his coat and found the knife handle. He did not pull it yet. In a crowd, a knife was a confession. A confession turned into bullets. A loud voice crackled from somewhere. A car radio, loud enough to spill over the screaming.
Meadwin Coin Wave Emergency Ban, timestamp October 1st, year 22137. Market Ward Advisory, active hostile intrusion. Citizens disperse, Knights responding. Repeat, Knights responding.
The broadcast cut in and out. The voice strained like the person speaking was trying to stay calm while their hands shook. The date hung in the air for a half-second, absurd and real. October 1st, year 22,137. The last days of the modern era, people said. The first days of the wasteland era, others whispered, like it had already started, and they were the last ones to admit it. The radio continued, words getting swallowed by static.
Do not gather at screening points unless directed. Curfew enforcement remains. World Defense Force contact unavailable.
That last line hit Rose like a slap. She stared at the passing car, wide-eyed, as if she could pull answers out of its exhaust. Pine heard it too. His jaw clenched. He did not have time to let the anger bloom. The grey scarves were closer now. One of them shoved a civilian out of the way with the butt of his rifle like the person was furniture. The civilian hit the ground and curled up, hands protecting his head. No one stopped to help. "Pine," Lavi said, and her voice was different now. Lower, sharper, a warning. He saw what she saw. A woman ahead of them was clutching her child, trying to push through the gap Pine had aimed for. The insurgents were angling toward that same gap, using the crowd's movement to hide their approach. They were funneling, closing. Pine's mind snapped into a cold, fast clarity. They were not just here to shoot and run. They were here to take. Hostages, leverage, chaos, a quick grab in a crowded place, then vanish into the city's bones. And Pine knew in his gut, with a certainty that made his stomach drop, that if they saw Rose's ears, if they saw what she was, then it would become more than a grab. It would become a prize. He leaned down close to Rose, mouth near her hood. "Rose," he said, steady and fierce, "do you feel my hand?" Rose nodded hard, eyes glassy. "When I push you, you go where I push," Pine said. "No questions." Rose's lips trembled. "What are the Knights doing?" Pine's gaze flicked up toward the rooftops. He saw the silhouette again. Dark armor. A figure moving now, no longer statue still. A Meadwin Knight, shifting position along the roofline. Another shape appeared behind them. Then another. They were coming, but they were still too far. And the market was still a storm of bodies between them and this moment. Pine did not lie to Rose. He did not have the time for a lie that would crack under pressure. "They're trying to get here," he said. A man slammed into Pine's shoulder and bounced off. Pine didn't even turn. His attention stayed locked forward. Then it happened. The gap they were trying to reach became a choke point as people tried to squeeze through at once. Someone fell. Someone else stepped on them. A stall table tipped and crashed, jars breaking, liquid spilling across the stone. The smell of vinegar punched up sharp. Rose's boot slid in the spill. She went down on one knee. Pine grabbed her under the arm and hauled her up. Rose's breath came out in a sob. Levy's gloved hands grabbed Rose's hood and yanked it forward, deeper, like she could hide her daughter from the entire world with fabric. "Keep it up," Levy whispered, voice shaking. "Keep it up." Rose's hands flew to her scarf instinctively. She pulled it tighter against her cheeks, eyes squeezing shut for a second, like she was bracing for impact. Impact came anyway. A grey scarf pushed through the crowd so suddenly Pine felt the air change. The insurgent was right there, close enough that Pine could see the stubble on his jaw and the hard line of his mouth. He held a pistol low, not raised, using the crowd as cover. His eyes flicked over Pine, over Levy, over Rose. And Rose, panicked, looked up at him. It was a stupid thing, a normal kid thing. When you are scared, you look at what is scaring you, hoping your eyes can make sense of it. The insurgent's gaze stuck on Rose's hood. He moved closer, and in the crush of bodies, his hand shot out like a thief's, fast and precise. His fingers hooked the edge of Rose's scarf. Levy reacted like an animal. She slapped his hand away with a sharp crack of glove against skin. "Don't touch her!" The insurgent's eyes narrowed. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed the power of causing fear. "What's under there?" he said, loud enough that Pine felt the words ripple through the people nearest them. Lavi's breath hitched. Pine's blood turned to ice. Rose froze. She could feel the scarf under her own fingers, suddenly aware of it as more than fabric. Her whole life, it had been a rule, a habit, a nuisance. Now it felt like armor, and also like a trap. Pine stepped forward, shoulder first, shoving into the insurgent's space. "Back off." The insurgent's pistol came up a few inches, still low, still hidden from most eyes. Close enough for Pine to see the barrel. "Careful," the insurgent murmured. "Crowds make accidents." Pine's mouth went dry. He could smell the insurgent's breath, sour and stale. Lavi pulled Rose tighter into her side. Rose's heartbeat felt like it was trying to break out of her chest. A second insurgent appeared behind the first, also in a grey scarf, also moving with purpose. He had a rifle slung across his chest and a hand on the strap, ready to snap it up. The first insurgent leaned in again, eyes on Rose, and his fingers flicked toward her hood like he couldn't help himself. Levy hit him again, harder this time, palm driving into his wrist. "I said don't." The insurgent's smile vanished. His hand flashed, and the butt of his pistol slammed into Levy's temple. The sound was dull, a sickening thunk, like hitting a melon with a brick. Lavi's eyes rolled. Her knees buckled. "Mom!" Rose screamed, and the scream tore out of her so raw that it didn't even sound like her own voice. Rose lunged, but Pine caught her, arm wrapping around her chest and pinning her to him. He held her too tight. He couldn't risk her diving into the crush and disappearing. Lavi hit the stone hard, head turning to the side. Blood immediately welled at her hairline and slid down her cheek. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed into Rose's view of that blood. Lavi didn't move. Rose made a strangled sound, trying to breathe, trying to get free. Pine's voice came out rough, half a growl. "Get away from my family." The insurgent with the pistol looked down at Levy like she was garbage. "Your family got in the way," he said. The second insurgent stepped in, grabbing Rose by the back of her coat. Rose's hood shifted in the grab. The scarf pulled tight. Rose felt the fabric snag near her ear. She grabbed it with both hands, terrified. Pine moved. He didn't think. He didn't plan. His body went hot and fast. His fist drove into the pistol-wielding insurgent's face. Knuckles against cheekbone. A crack. The insurgent's head snapped sideways. Blood sprayed from his lip. The crowd around them recoiled, people shouting, bodies jamming tighter. Someone screamed again. Someone else yelled, "Knife!" even though Pine hadn't drawn one. The second insurgent yanked Rose back hard. Rose stumbled, boots scraping, nearly falling over Levy's body. Pine stepped toward Rose, reaching. A rifle butt slammed into Pine's ribs from the side. All the air left him. It felt like his lungs folded. He made a sound he didn't recognize, a harsh, choking gasp. His knees buckled for half a second. The insurgent with the rifle leaned in close and hissed, "Stay down, coin rat." Pine forced himself upright anyway, pain blinding. His vision flickered at the edges. He tasted bile. He saw Levy on the ground. He saw Rose being dragged. Something inside him snapped. But it was not madness. It was focus. A cold, furious clarity. He tried to move again. The pistol-wielding insurgent recovered enough to shove the gun barrel against Pine's throat. Close. So close Pine could feel the metal chill through sweat. "Move again," the insurgent whispered, "and your kid watches you drop." Rose's eyes were huge. She shook her head hard. "Dad, stop, stop." Pine held still. His hands were up. His body shook with the effort of it. "I'll go," Pine said, voice rough. "Take me. Leave her." The insurgent laughed, short and mean. "You think this is charity?" He glanced down at Rose again, hungry curiosity back in his eyes. "We take what we want." Levy groaned, faint. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Rose made a sobbing sound. "Mum, please." Levy tried to push herself up, one hand sliding in the spilled vinegar and broken glass. She hissed in pain, then forced herself up anyway, staggering. The insurgent's pistol whipped toward her again. Pine's voice went sharp. "Don't." The insurgent held Pine's gaze with that dead smile. "Then behave." Behind them, the emergency radio voice burst again from a passing vehicle, louder now, frantic.
Market Ward, hostile intrusion. Confirmed. Repeat. Confirmed. Knights responding from East Spine and South Coin. Citizens disperse. Do not resist. Do not engage.
The voice cut, static roaring, then returned for one last line.
Timestamp October 1st, year 22137. This is an active war zone.
Active war zone. Rose heard it, and something inside her went hollow. She had heard adults talk about war zones like they were places you read about. Now the radio was saying it like it was a weather report. Lavi's eyes found Rose's. Even dazed, even bleeding, she forced a look into her daughter's face that was pure instruction. Stay covered. Stay alive. Lavi tried to step forward anyway. The rifle-wielding insurgent slammed the butt of his weapon into Levy's shoulder, hard enough that Rose heard the impact and saw her mother's body jerk. Lavi made a sharp noise and went down to one knee. Rose screamed again, throat burning. Pine surged forward in spite of the gun at his throat. The pistol pressed harder. The insurgent's voice went quiet, deadly. "You want to die here?" Fine. We can do that. Pine stopped. His hands trembled. His eyes were bright with fury and helplessness. Rose looked at Pine and saw something she had never seen in him before. Fear. Real fear. Not for himself. For her. Rose's voice shook. "Dad, are they going to kill us?" Pine swallowed hard. "No," he said, and he did not know if he was lying. He needed the word anyway. Levy's voice came out hoarse from the ground. "Rose," she whispered, "look at me." Rose turned toward her mother, tears blurring everything. "Mom." Levy's face was smeared with blood. Her eyes were glassy, but still sharp enough to hold Rose. "Keep it up," she whispered, almost a hiss. "Promise me." Rose's hands clutched the scarf. She nodded frantically. "I promise." The pistol-wielding insurgent heard Levy's whisper. His gaze snapped down at Rose's scarf again, suspicious and hungry. He stepped closer, hand rising toward Rose's hood. Levy, still on her knee, lashed out and slapped his hand away again. Even half-dazed, she moved like a mother defending a cub. The insurgent's face twisted with anger. He grabbed a fistful of Rose's scarf and yanked. Rose gasped as fabric dug into her throat. Levy lunged, trying to grab his wrist. The insurgent shoved Levy back with his boot, hard enough to knock her sideways. Pine's voice ripped out of him. "Stop!" The insurgent yanked again, and for the briefest instant, Rose's hood slipped enough that the edge of her ear showed. It was only a glimpse. It was enough. The insurgent's eyes widened. His expression changed from anger to something worse, something sharp and greedy. "Well," he breathed, almost delighted. "Look at that." Rose's stomach dropped. She didn't understand why his face changed. She just felt the shift in danger, like air pressure before a storm. Pine saw it too. He felt the world tilt. He'd seen men look at coin that way. He'd seen men look at guns that way. He'd seen men look at rations like they were gold. Now an insurgent was looking at his daughter like she was treasure. Levy's voice cracked, desperate. "She's a kid." The insurgent laughed. "A kid that's worth something." Another insurgent appeared at the edge of the crush, also grey scarf, also armed, eyes scanning. He saw the glimpse of Rose's ear, saw the reaction, and his gaze sharpened too. Pine's hands clenched, his throat burned against the gun barrel. "Move!" the pistol-wielding insurgent ordered, shoving Pine backward with the muzzle. "All of you, now!" The crowd around them was still surging, still screaming, still breaking apart. People were trying to flee the market, but the insurgents were using the chaos like camouflage. Pine bent down quickly, ignoring the pain in his ribs, and grabbed Levy under the arm. He hauled her up, half carrying her. Levy's legs wobbled. She gritted her teeth and forced them to work. Rose tried to step toward the direction Pine was guiding, but an insurgent's hand clamped onto her sleeve. Rose twisted, pulling her scarf back up with her other hand, frantic. "Dad!" Rose sobbed. "Dad, please!" Pine looked at her, eyes wild, and made himself speak calmly, even as his chest tore with panic. "Rose," he said, voice low and fierce. "Do what they say. Stay close to Levy. Keep it up." Rose nodded, tears streaming, breath hitching. They were shoved forward through a gap between stalls where people were too busy running to notice what was happening in that small pocket of violence. A woman reached out toward Rose as if to help, then saw the rifle, saw the pistol, and pulled her hand back like it had been burned. Rose saw the woman's face. Shame, fear, relief that it wasn't her child being taken. Rose hated her for that and understood her at the same time. That understanding made Rose feel older by years in a single blink. They reached the edge of the market, where the buildings narrowed into alley routes. Pine glanced up again, desperate, searching for the knights. He saw movement on the rooftops now. Dark armor. At least two, maybe three. A knight raised an arm, pointing. Another dropped down onto a lower roof, moving fast. They were coming. They were still too far. A shot cracked again somewhere behind them. More screams. The market was a living thing panicking. The insurgent shoved Pine forward. "Move, coin man!" Rose looked back over her shoulder and saw the market through the alley mouth. For a half-second, she saw the old metal ribs of the market hall. She saw tarps flapping. She saw people running. She saw a silhouette in dark armor moving along a roofline like a shadow that had decided to become real. Then the alley swallowed them. The light dimmed. The air changed, cooler and damp. The walls closed in, and the sounds of the market began to fade behind stone, replaced by the tight, close breathing of captors and captives alike. Rose's last glimpse of open sky vanished as the insurgents dragged the Halveth family deeper into the city's back routes, toward places that did not have street names anymore, toward places where rules stopped applying.
Part 3.
The mark they tried to pretend they didn't see. The alley swallowed them the way a cellar swallows light. 1 second Rose could still taste the market on the air, vinegar and smoke and panic. And the next, it was damp stone and old trash, and a cold that didn't belong to weather. The walls tightened in. The sound changed. Even the shouting behind them dulled, like the city itself was turning its head away. Pine stumbled once, because the hit to his ribs had left something inside him bruised and angry. He caught himself, jaw clenched so hard his teeth hurt. He kept moving because a pistol kept nudging him forward, because a rifle strap kept yanking Rose by the sleeve, because Lavi was leaning on him and still forcing her legs to work, even though blood had dried in her hair.
Rose's fingers were numb from gripping her scarf.
Every time she loosened her hold, even by accident, her brain screamed at her to pull it higher. Her mother's last look in the market had carried that instruction like it was carved into bone.
Keep it up. Keep it up. The insurgents pushed them through a door that looked like it belonged to an empty storefront, the kind of place that used to sell candles or books before everything turned into either food, weapons, or nothing. The sign above the door was gone, leaving only pale rectangles on the brick where paint had been protected from sun. Inside, it smelled worse. A stale, oily stink, like someone had been burning cheap fuel in a sealed room. The floor creaked. There were shelves along the walls, with old jars still sitting on them, cloudy with years of dust. The insurgents didn't slow. They knew the path. They dragged them through the dark
and down a staircase that turned twice. The steps were damp. Rose's boot slipped, and she nearly fell. The hand on her sleeve jerked her upright without kindness.
"Watch your feet,"
the insurgent muttered, as if her clumsiness offended him. Rose wanted to bite him. The thought surprised her with its heat. She had never bitten anyone. She had barely ever hit anyone. She was the kind of kid who said sorry when someone else bumped into her. Now, she wanted teeth and blood and a way out.
They reached the bottom of the stairs,
and the air turned wrong. Basements in Midwin were always damp, always close, but this one had something else. It was the smell of too many people breathing into the same space for too long. It was sweat and fear and old urine and wet concrete. It was the taste you got when you licked a battery as a kid, that sharp, metallic sting, except it sat in the back of your throat and refused to leave. A door swung open and light stabbed out. A harsh beam from a lantern. Rose squinted. For a moment, she couldn't see anything but brightness. Then her eyes adjusted, and she saw the room.
It was bigger than she expected.
A long storage space with rough stone walls, low ceiling, and shelves that had been stripped bare. The floor was uneven, cracked in places. A thin puddle shone along one wall, reflecting the lantern light like an open eye.
People were huddled against the far side.
Some sat with knees pulled to chests. Some lay flat, too tired to hold themselves up. Faces lifted toward the newcomers with a particular kind of fear, the fear of people who had already learned that anything entering this room was probably bad. An older man near the wall stared at Rose's scarf first. Not her face, the scarf. His gaze flicked down, as if his eyes had been trained to look for that kind of thing. Then he looked away quickly, like he didn't want to be caught staring. The insurgents shoved Pine forward and forced him to his knees. Cable ties came out, sharp and bright. Pine tried to keep his breathing steady while they wrapped his wrists tight enough that his fingers tingled. Pain bloomed in his ribs every time he moved wrong. Levy stumbled and dropped to one knee beside Rose. One hand braced on the floor. Her other hand went immediately to Rose's coat, tugging it down, tugging her hood forward, checking her scarf like she was checking armor on a soldier.
Rose whispered.
"Mom." Levy's eyes were glassy. Blood had dried at her temple and made her hair stick. She still looked at Rose with focus that didn't match her injury. "I'm here," Levy whispered back. "I'm right here." Pine turned his head, jaw tight, and looked at them. He couldn't reach. He couldn't touch. The cable ties kept his hands useless. That helplessness sat in his chest, heavier than the bruised ribs. The pistol-wielding insurgent stepped into Pine's view and crouched, eye level. "You're Pine Halveth," the man said, like he was tasting the name. Pine said nothing. The insurgent smiled slightly. "You will talk." Pine's mouth was dry. He swallowed once. "About what?" The insurgent's smile widened. "About your roots, your contacts, the places the nights are weak. About your little stash of coin you keep hidden like you're a big man." Pine's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you think I am." The insurgent leaned closer. "A liar," he said. He stood and nodded to another insurgent. The other one stepped in and kicked Pine hard in the side. Pine grunted, the sound torn out of him, his ribs lit up white-hot. He folded, then forced himself upright again, breathing through clenched teeth. Rose made a small noise, half gasp, half sob. Lavy's hand clamped around Rose's wrist. Not a warning this time, a grip that said, "Stay still, stay quiet. Survive this second." The insurgent glanced at Rose, then at Levy. His eyes lingered on Levy's head wound, like he was considering whether to make it worse. Instead, he turned away and waved his pistol at the captives in the corner. "Sit," he snapped at Pine. "You get up when we tell you." Pine shifted closer to Rose and Levy as much as the cable ties allowed, trying to place his body between them and the insurgents. Even kneeling. Levy leaned into him, using his shoulder to keep herself upright. She whispered without moving her lips. "Your ribs." Pine whispered back. "Later." Rose's voice came out thin. "Are the nights coming?" Pine's eyes flicked to the ceiling, as if he could hear them through stone. Somewhere above, the city moved. You could feel it in the muffled vibration of distant impacts, in the faint tremor that ran through the floor every time something heavy rolled down the street. A car passed overhead, and its radio voice leaked through the building like a ghost you couldn't chase away.
Timestamp October 1st. Year 22137. Market Ward. Hostile intrusion. Knights responding.
Static swallowed the rest. Rose's heart jumped at the word knights. The hope was sharp enough to hurt. "What are the knights doing?" she whispered.
Levy pressed her forehead briefly against Rose's hood,
A touch that was almost a kiss. "They're hunting," she whispered. Rose clung to that word. Hunting sounded like something with an ending. A different sound rose above them. A burst of gunfire, far away, then closer, then far again. Not constant, but steady enough that Rose couldn't stop listening for it. Every crack made her shoulders jump. Every pause made her chest tighten, because she expected the next one. The room's other captives stayed mostly silent. Silence here wasn't calm. It was exhaustion. It was people trying not to draw attention. Rose could hear quiet breathing, quiet sniffing, the occasional stifled sob that someone pressed into their sleeve. An older woman in the corner stared at Rose again, eyes sharp despite her fear. Her gaze darted to Rose's scarf, then to Levy's gloves, then to the way Pine held himself between them and the insurgents. She leaned toward the man beside her and whispered something. Rose caught only one word: fever. Rose's stomach tightened. She leaned closer to Lavy and whispered, "Mom, what fever?" Levy's hand tightened. "Rose," she said under her breath, warning. The older woman must have seen Rose's face, because she whispered again, louder this time, but still careful. "Elf fever," she murmured, then immediately looked away like she had spoken a curse. Rose froze. The word elf hit her like a cold splash. She had asked about it. She had said it out loud in the market. She had seen her parents' faces change. Now strangers were whispering it in a basement like it meant death. Rose's voice trembled. I don't know what that is." The older woman's eyes flicked toward the insurgents, then back to Rose. She didn't answer directly. She mouthed the words without sound. "Don't say it." Pine's jaw tightened so hard a muscle jumped. He leaned in, voice low enough that Rose barely heard it. "Rose, listen. You keep your scarf up. You don't talk about that word. You understand?" Rose nodded, but tears burned behind her eyes. "Why is everyone—" Levy cut her off, voice soft but fierce. "Because people get stupid about rumors, because they think rare means valuable, because they think sick means danger." Her voice faltered for a heartbeat, then steadied. "You keep your scarf up." Rose's breathing turned shallow. She clutched the scarf like it was the only solid thing in the room. The insurgents gathered near the door at the top of the stairs, talking in low voices. They had a small radio too, the kind that fit in a coat pocket. It crackled occasionally, spitting out pieces of the city's panic.
Coin wave. Knights redeploying. East Spine and South Coin. Civilians.
One insurgent, the one who had first grabbed Rose, leaned against the wall and stared at her like she was a problem he hadn't solved yet. He wasn't smiling now. He was thinking. After a while, he pushed off the wall and walked toward them. The room shifted as he moved. Captives shrank back. Levy stiffened. Pine's shoulders tightened as if he could make himself larger. The insurgent crouched in front of Rose and reached out, slow, deliberate, like he wanted to make her watch the hand coming. Rose's body locked. She pulled her scarf higher. "Stop!" Levy snapped. The insurgent's eyes flicked to Levy, amused. "You hit me twice," he said. "You want a third time?" Levy's jaw clenched. "Don't touch her." The insurgent ignored her and hooked a finger under the edge of Rose's coat near her shoulder. He tugged, trying to pull her hood back again, trying to see what he'd seen for that split second in the market. Rose jerked away instinctively. She almost fell over. Pine lunged forward, cable ties biting into his wrists, and got between them as much as he could.
"Don't," Pine said,
Voice low, raw. The insurgent met Pine's gaze. Or what?
Pine didn't answer.
Because there was no answer that mattered to a man holding a gun. The insurgent's hand slid down Rose's coat instead, checking for pockets, checking seams. His fingers were rough. He pressed and patted like she was cargo. Rose's cheeks burned with humiliation. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to scream. She wanted her mother to be unhurt, and her father to have his hands free, and the knights to be here already. The insurgent's hand found the back of Rose's coat, near the center, and paused. He frowned slightly, as if he'd felt something through the fabric. He tugged the coat down a bit, not enough to expose skin yet, but enough to reveal the collar of Rose's shirt beneath. Rose squirmed, trying to pull away. Levy shoved the insurgent's hand away. "I said don't!" The insurgent grabbed Levy's wrist hard enough that her glove creaked. "Touch me again," he murmured, "and you lose that hand." Levy didn't flinch. Her eyes were bright with rage and pain. "Then take it," she spat. Rose made a choked sound. "Mom!" Pine's voice broke slightly. "Leave them alone." The insurgent stared at Levy for a long moment, then released her wrist with a shove. He turned back to Rose, eyes narrowed, and grabbed Rose's coat more firmly, yanking it down from her shoulders. Rose squealed and twisted, scarf slipping a fraction. Levy snapped her hand up and shoved the scarf back into place. The coat slipped low enough that the back of Rose's shirt rode up a little, exposing a strip of skin along her spine. For a heartbeat, the lantern light caught something on that skin. A mark. Not a tattoo like Meadwin Street ink. Not a bruise, not fresh. It looked like old scarring, precise and centered. A thin ring, pale and clean-edged, encircling a darker shape beneath it. The darker shape had the suggestion of a flame, but wrong somehow, like the flame had been burned into the skin and then healed over with stubbornness. A ring around a black flame, dead center of her spine. The insurgent's face changed. It wasn't the hungry look he'd had in the market. This was different. This was the look of someone who recognizes a story they thought was only a story. His mouth opened slightly. No sound came out at first. Then he said a word under his breath, like he didn't mean to. "Shaded." He stopped himself. Another insurgent, hearing the shift in tone, stepped closer. "What is it?" he asked, voice suddenly careful. The first insurgent didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed fixed on the mark. His hand hovered in the air, uncertain now, like he was afraid to touch it. He swallowed. "You see that?" he murmured. The second insurgent leaned in. His eyes widened, too. For a moment, both of them were quiet. Hines saw their reaction and felt cold roll through him. He didn't know what they'd seen. He only knew it made them hesitate, and hesitation in men like this was never simple. Levy's breath hitched. Her eyes darted to Rose's back, then back to the insurgents, and something like dread moved across her face, fast and sharp. She yanked Rose's coat up hard, covering the strip of skin, then wrapped her arms around Rose like she could hide her with her body. Rose didn't understand what had happened. She only felt the way the air changed. "What?" Rose whispered, voice small. "What did they see?" "Nothing," Levy said too fast, then swallowed and forced her voice into something steadier. "Just stay close." The insurgent stood slowly, like he didn't want to make sudden movements. He backed up a half step. "Who are you?" he asked, but he wasn't looking at Rose's face anymore. He was looking at Pine and Levy now, like they were the answer. Pine's voice came out rough. "Medwin, like everyone else." The insurgent's eyes narrowed. "That mark," he said quietly. "Where did she get it?" Levy's chin lifted. "She was born with a lot of things, Levy said, and her voice was tight. "You don't get to ask."
The insurgent's jaw worked.
He glanced at the second insurgent, and in that glance, Rose saw something she had never seen on a man like this.
Unease. The second insurgent muttered.
Old stories.
The first one hissed back.
"Shut up!"
They stepped away from the family.
and moved toward the corner where their radio sat. They spoke low, but Rose caught fragments because fear makes you listen too hard.
Halvereth, Heath. That mark, if she can. The words didn't connect for Rose.
They were just sounds that made Pine's shoulders stiffen and Lavi's fingers dig into Rose's coat.
The first insurgent returned.
But he didn't swagger now. He crouched again, keeping his voice lower, almost respectful, in a way that made Rose's skin crawl.
Rose,
He said, testing the name. "You heard of the lay?"
Rose stared.
Confused. What?
The insurgent's eyes flicked to Levy.
Levy said nothing,
He leaned closer to Rose.
and for a second, Rose thought he might pull her scarf down again. Instead, he spoke slowly, like he was coaxing a skittish animal.
Think, he murmured.
"Think that lantern goes out. Think it hard."
Rose blinked at him.
"Why would I do that?"
Do it, he insisted.
And the insistence was sharper now, frustration cutting through his caution.
Pine barked.
"Leave her alone."
The insurgent didn't look away from Rose.
"Do it," he said again. "If you can."
Rose's stomach twisted.
She didn't know what this was. A game? A test? A trap?
She glanced at Levy.
Levy's eyes were wide, and Rose saw fear there that had nothing to do with guns. It was older than that. It was the fear of something hidden, being dragged into daylight.
Levy whispered.
"Rose, don't."
The insurgent's voice snapped.
"Do it."
Rose's breath came quick.
She stared at the lantern across the room. Her mind scrambled. She tried to imagine it going dark. She tried to picture the light dying, the room sinking into shadow.
Nothing happened. The lantern kept burning,
Steady and harsh.
the insurgent's eyes tightened.
"Again."
Rose shook her head.
"I can't." "Again," he said, louder now, and the room's captives flinched.
Rose tried again.
Because he was terrifying, and because she wanted him to stop looking at her like that. She squeezed her eyes shut and pictured darkness.
The lantern still burned. The insurgent's mouth twisted.
He reached out and grabbed Rose's chin, forcing her face up. His fingers were less careful now. "Think it," he snarled.
Pine
Surged forward, cable ties cutting into his wrists. "Don't touch her."
The second insurgent stepped in
and slammed a boot into Pine's bound hands, grinding down. Pine made a sound that was part pain, part rage. He bit it back fast, but Rose saw his face contort, saw sweat bead at his temple.
Rose screamed.
"Stop!"
The lantern still burned.
The insurgent released Rose's chin and stood, breathing hard like his own anger surprised him. He stared at Rose for a long moment, eyes searching her like she was a locked door.
Nothing.
Rose was just a terrified child in a basement.
The insurgent's expression shifted again.
The unease didn't vanish, but it got buried under something meaner. A man who's afraid and embarrassed becomes dangerous fast.
He spat on the floor near Rose's boot.
"Fake," he muttered, and the word landed like an insult and a relief all at once. He turned and barked at another insurgent. "Tie the man tighter. If he tries anything again, break his fingers."
Rose's stomach flipped.
Levy pulled Rose closer, whispering into her hood, "Don't look. Keep breathing."
Rose's eyes were wide and wet.
She couldn't stop looking. She couldn't stop hearing Pine's pain.
Pine forced himself
To sit upright again, hands shaking, eyes locked on Rose and Levy. His voice came out strained, low. "Rose," he whispered, "you're okay. You're okay."
Rose shook her head.
small and frantic. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry."
Pine's face tightened.
"You did nothing wrong." Above them, the city rumbled again. A heavier vibration this time, like something large moved fast overhead, or something hit the ground in the distance. Rose couldn't tell. Everything below ground felt like guessing. A car radio passed somewhere outside, the sound faint through stone, but the voice came through in broken pieces.
Knights in pursuit. Insurgents. Hostage.
Static. Then, very faint, another line.
World Defense Force contact still unavailable.
Rose swallowed. The words felt like the last threads snapping. In the corner, the older woman who had whispered about fever earlier shook her head slowly. She muttered to herself, voice barely audible.
99 out of 100, she whispered.
No cure. No cure.
Rose heard it
And shivered. She pressed closer to Levi.
The insurgents gathered again near the stairs,
Voices low and urgent. The first insurgent kept glancing back at Rose's family as if the mark on her spine was still glowing under her coat, even though it was covered.
They argued,
In harsh whispers.
"If the nights are closing, we move now. Don't take her to screening points. Sell her to the right buyer."
That mark, one voice said, almost angry with superstition. If she could change things, that lantern would be dead.
Another replied.
Then why is she branded?
The first voice snapped.
Shut up about it.
Rose didn't understand most of it.
She only understood that the way the insurgents looked at her had changed twice already.
First hungry, then careful. Now mean. Mean was the worst.
Because mean didn't hesitate. Mean didn't wonder. Mean just hurt. The pistol-wielding insurgent returned to Pine and crouched again. He smiled, but it was colder now.
"You're going to talk,"
He said, like they were back to simple cruelty. "You're going to tell us what you know. And if you try to be brave, we take pieces."
Pine stared at him,
Breathing heavy, hands trembling. "You already took my morning," he rasped. "What else do you want?" The insurgent's smile widened. "Everything." He stood and nodded toward the stairs. "We relocate," he called to the others. "Knights are sniffing around. We don't stay in one hole when hounds are close."
The captives in the corner stirred.
Fear rising again. Movement meant danger. Movement meant streets. Movement meant someone might get shot just because an insurgent got impatient.
Levy's fingers tightened on Rose's coat.
Rose could feel her mother's tremble now. It wasn't just pain. It was exhaustion and terror, and the strain of holding a secret shut with brute force.
Rose whispered.
"Mom, what was that mark?"
Levy's voice cracked.
Tiny. Later, Rose's throat tightened. "You always say late."
Levy swallowed hard.
She pressed her forehead to Rose's hood, just for a second, and in that touch, Rose felt everything her mother couldn't say out loud in a room full of guns. Then, Lavy lifted her head and forced steadiness back into her voice.
"Rose,"
she whispered, "you do what we say. You keep your scarf up. You keep your hood up. You keep your thoughts quiet."
Rose blinked.
"My thoughts?" Lavy's eyes flicked toward the insurgents, then back. "Just quiet," she insisted.
Rose didn't understand,
But she nodded because she could hear the fear in her mother's throat.
The insurgents moved toward the captives
With cable ties and rough hands, hauling people up, shoving them into line. Someone cried. Someone begged. A fist answered the begging.
Pine shifted closer to
Rose and Levy as much as he could, and even bound, even bruised, he still tried to place himself as a barrier.
Rose looked at her father's face,
At the sweat and the anger, and the way he kept his eyes steady on her, like that steadiness was a rope holding her from falling apart. Above them, the city kept making war sounds. Distant gunshots, vehicles, the occasional deeper thud that made dust fall from the ceiling.
October 1st.
Year 22,137.
The modern era dying overhead.
slow and ugly.
And down here,
In the wrong air of a basement, Rose felt something shift in the way adults looked at her. Something she didn't have words for. A brand she didn't know she carried. A name she didn't know she was tied to.
and men with guns.
Deciding what to do with a child they suddenly feared and didn't believe in at the same time. The insurgent grabbed Rose's sleeve again and yanked.
Move, he snapped.
"We're going."
Lavi pulled Rose close.
Whispering through clenched teeth. "Hold on to me."
Rose nodded,
Terrified, they were shoved toward the stairs.
and somewhere above,
The faintest hint of a siren rose and fell, as if the city was warning itself.
Part 4.
Moving day, the city's veins, and the first time Rose realizes people can smell fear. They didn't let the basement stay quiet. The moment the insurgent decided they were relocating, the room became a workshop of cruelty. Cable ties clicked, boots scraped, lantern light swung and made the shadows jump. The captives in the corner stiffened like animals who knew what a leash meant, because movement was where accidents happened. A basement was bad, but a street was worse. A street had angles, witnesses, bullets that came from nowhere, and people who decided your life was an acceptable price for their own escape.
Rose was yanked forward by her sleeve
Again, hard enough that her shoulder burned. The same hand, the same grip, like the man wanted her to remember who owned her right now.
Lavi pulled Rose back into her side
Immediately, arm across Rose's shoulders, hand cupping the back of Rose's hood to keep it down. Rose could feel her mother's heart racing through the fabric, fast and uneven. It made Rose's own heart speed up just from contact.
Pine shuffled to his feet
With his hands bound in front of him. He moved carefully because the bruised ribs screamed with each breath. He tried to keep his body between the insurgents and his family, but they were smarter than that. They shoved him forward and off to the side, making him lead the line like a shield.
A captive behind them
Started to cry. Quiet at first, then louder, then panicked, like the sound was leaking out in spite of their attempts to swallow it. The pistol-wielding insurgent spun and hit the crying man in the face with the back of his hand. The sound echoed off stone.
Shut it, he snapped.
"You want the knights to hear you?"
The crying stopped
Instantly. The man's breath came in hiccuped pools, but he didn't make another sound.
Rose watched.
Sick. That was how fast the world worked now. Pain. Silence. Move on.
Lavi leaned down.
Mouth close to Rose's hood. "Look at me," she whispered.
Rose's eyes flicked up.
Lavi's voice came out tight and low. "You stay with me. You keep your scarf where it is. If you trip, you grab my coat, you understand?"
Rose nodded quickly. Lavi held Rose's gaze a beat longer,
like she was trying to pack a whole lifetime of instruction into one look. Then Lavi straightened and forced her face into something hard. A mask that didn't invite more hits. The insurgents herded them toward the stairs.
As Rose climbed,
She noticed her mother's left arm was trembling. Not just from fear. The rifle butt hit had done something. Lavi's shoulder sat wrong, just slightly, and her breaths were shallow, like deep breaths cost too much.
"Mom,"
Rose whispered, "Are you hurt?"
Lavi didn't look at her.
Later, she whispered back, and Rose hated the word, but she also understood it. Later meant you were still alive to talk.
They reached the top of the stairs.
And the door opened into the dim shell of the storefront.
Above ground,
The air smelled different. Not cleaner, just louder. Smoke, damp brick, garbage rot. The distant bite of gunpowder that never fully left the city anymore,
there was a faint siren somewhere.
wavering in and out, like the city was trying to warn itself, but had lost the strength to commit. Outside, the street was narrow and wet, puddles reflecting broken signs. The sky was low, grey, pressed down like a lid. The world looked tired.
The insurgents moved fast,
because fast meant fewer chances for the knights to close in,
They kept close to walls.
pushing the line along alleys and half-collapsed corridors. Rose could barely see beyond the hood. She caught quick slices of the world through gaps. A dead car with its doors stripped. A boarded window with a coin symbol painted on it. A man crouched behind a dumpster, holding a pistol, eyes wide as he watched the hostage line pass. He didn't move. He didn't help. He just watched, like helping would get him killed. From somewhere close, a radio blared from a passing vehicle, loud enough to cut through the wet air.
Midwind Coinwave Emergency Ban, timestamp October 1st, year 22137. Hostile cell confirmed, Knights pursuing. Citizens advised to shelter and avoid lower stone screening points.
The words spilled out and then broke into static. Another voice pushed through, distorted.
World Defense Force contact unavailable. Repeat, unavailable.
The broadcast ended in a crackle. Rose's stomach turned at the phrase again. Unavailable. Like the world's big rescue plan was simply not picking up the call. A gunshot cracked somewhere to their left. The sounds slapped the walls. People in windows ducked back. A dog barked once and then went quiet. One of the insurgents muttered, "Knights are close." The pistol-wielding one snapped back, "Then keep moving." They turned down a narrow pass that smelled like mold and old water. The ground dipped, then dipped again. The air got colder, damp enough to cling to Rose's skin. A sewer access, half hidden behind a collapsed gate. The insurgents didn't hesitate. They shoved the first captive down the ladder. The metal rungs were slick. The captive cried out, then caught themselves and climbed down faster. Rose's turn came. She looked down into darkness, and her legs locked. Levy's hand clamped onto the back of her coat. "Rose," she whispered. "Down." Rose's voice trembled. "I can't see." "You don't have to see," Levy whispered. "You just hold the rung, 1 foot at a time." Rose swallowed hard. She reached out and felt cold metal under her gloves. Her hands were shaking. She lowered 1 foot, then another, and climbed down into the city's veins. The smell hit her first. Old water, rust, waste, rot. It was a smell that made you breathe shallow without thinking. At the bottom, the tunnel was wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. Water ran along the center channel in a thin stream. The walls were slick brick, stained with years of everything. The insurgents forced them into a line again and pushed them forward. Pine stumbled once on the wet brick. An insurgent grabbed his shoulder and yanked him upright. "Keep moving," the insurgent snarled. Pine didn't answer. He just breathed through pain, eyes locked ahead, and Rose saw his jaw clench like he was biting down on a scream. They moved through the tunnel while the city above them rumbled. Rose could still hear it, faint and distant. Vehicles, gunfire, shouting. A world continuing to break. The tunnel lights were dead, but the insurgents had lanterns. The light bobbed as they walked, making shadows crawl across the walls. Every now and then, Rose caught glimpses of graffiti carved into the brick. Old marks, names of crews, warnings, crude drawings. Some were fresh, some looked decades old. They passed an alcove where something lay on the ground. Rose thought it was a pile of rags at first. Then the lantern swung closer, and she saw a hand. A body, half in the water channel, face turned away, clothes soaked and dark. A dead person left down here like garbage. Rose's throat tightened. She made a small sound she couldn't stop. Levy immediately pulled her closer. "Eyes down," Levy whispered. Rose couldn't stop seeing it. The hand. The stillness. The way death looked ordinary in this place. One of the insurgents glanced back at Rose's reaction, and his mouth curled. "First time seeing a body?" he asked, voice mocking. Rose didn't answer. The insurgent laughed softly. Welcome to the Wasteland era, kid. Modern's done.
Rose didn't know what to do with that.
She just kept moving,
They walked for a long time.
long enough that Rose's legs started to ache, long enough that the damp cold seeped into her knees. The air made her throat scratch,
They reached a junction.
where the tunnel widened into a larger maintenance chamber. Old pipes ran along the ceiling like ribs. A ladder led up to another hatch.
The insurgents stopped. The pistol-wielding one raised a hand.
Hold!
Everyone froze. He listened. Rose held her breath without meaning to. For a moment,
All Rose could hear was water trickling and the lantern's small hiss. Then, faintly, from far above, a different kind of sound drifted down.
boots. Not running feet,
Not chaotic footfalls,
boots with weight.
and rhythm.
Pine's head
Lifted slightly, eyes sharpening. Levy's grip tightened on Rose's shoulder.
The insurgents heard it too.
Rose could tell by the way they stiffened.
The pistol-wielding
Insurgent muttered, "Knights,"
His voice wasn't loud.
but it carried an edge that Rose hadn't heard before.
Something like,
Worry.
he snapped at the
Insurgent nearest the ladder. Check. The insurgent climbed the ladder quickly, pushing the hatch up a fraction. A sliver of grey light cut down. He listened.
Rose heard nothing.
But she was a child with fear in her ears. The insurgents were trained to listen for the shape of threat. The insurgent on the ladder whispered down, "Street's hot. Patrol passes every minute."
The pistol-wielding
Insurgent cursed under his breath. "Then we wait for the gap." He turned his gaze on the captives like he was counting tools.
His eyes landed on Rose. Rose felt it like a hand on her skin.
That stare again. That measuring.
He stepped closer.
And Rose's body tightened automatically,
Lavy shifted.
placing her shoulder in front of Rose a bit more. A move so small it could look casual. It wasn't casual. The insurgent crouched near Rose, lowering his voice. "Hey," he said, and the softness made Rose more afraid than shouting would have.
Rose didn't answer. He reached out.
Slow, and tapped Rose's coat at the back, right where he had seen the mark earlier.
Rose flinched.
Levy snapped, "Don't touch her!"
The insurgent didn't look at Lavy.
His eyes stayed on Rose, curious and angry all at once. "You ever hear stories about Heath?" he asked.
Rose blinked.
"Who?"
The insurgent's mouth
Tightened. The fact that she didn't know seemed to irritate him, like he wanted the story to be real enough to scare her.
"You got a brand like a story,"
He muttered. Then he raised his voice slightly, calling to another insurgent, "Give me your blade."
A knife was handed down. Rose's breathing quickened.
Pine shifted forward, but a rifle muzzle nudged him back. The insurgent with the knife leaned in and hooked the tip under the hem of Rose's coat.
Lavy tried to shove him away.
He backhanded her, not hard enough to knock her down this time, but enough to remind her who had the weapon. Rose made a small, broken sound. The knife lifted the coat hem and tugged it down, just enough to expose the back of Rose's shirt again. Rose felt cool air on her spine. She froze. Her whole body locked.
The lantern light
Caught the mark again. The thin ring. The darker flame shape beneath it. Centered. Precise. The insurgent stared at it for a long beat, like he was fighting with his own beliefs.
Then he leaned closer to Rose's ear.
And spoke quietly.
"Think,"
He whispered. "Think I drop dead right here."
Rose stared at him.
Confused and terrified. "What?"
His hand tightened on the coat.
"Do it," he hissed. "If you can change things, if you can twist the world, do it."
Rose's heart hammered.
She didn't understand what he wanted. She didn't even understand how thinking could do anything at all.
But the fear in his eyes was real.
It was buried under anger, but it was there.
Rose
Squeezed her eyes shut. She didn't want him dead. She wanted him away from her. She wanted her parents safe. She wanted daylight. She wanted the nights. She wanted a world that didn't ask a child to perform miracles.
She tried anyway.
Because the knife was there, and her mother had blood on her face, and her father's hands were tied.
Rose thought.
Go away. Go away. Go away.
Nothing happened.
The insurgent's breath came out hard. He waited another second, like he was giving the universe time.
Still nothing.
His face twisted with disgust and relief at once. He shoved Rose's coat back up hard enough that she stumbled. Worthless, he muttered. Then he spit to the side. Levy pulled Rose back to her chest instantly, hands shaking. Pine's voice came low, shaking with rage. She's a kid. The insurgent stared at Pine. The caution was gone now. He had tested his superstition and decided it wasn't real enough to protect Rose. That decision made him crueler. He stepped to Pine and slammed the butt of his pistol into Pine's bound hands. Pine grunted, face contorting. Rose heard the cable ties creak as Pine's wrists flexed against them. Pine bit back a louder sound, but his whole body shook.
Rose screamed.
"Stop!" The insurgent leaned in close to Pine. "You're going to talk," he said, voice almost calm. "You're going to tell me where nights rotate, where the screening crews set up, where the safe bunkers are. You're going to tell me the routes you and your little coin wife take."
Levy's eyes flashed.
"Don't call me that."
The insurgent laughed.
Then grabbed Levy's injured shoulder and squeezed. Levy hissed, face going white. Rose lunged forward instinctively, but an insurgent yanked her back by the hood. "Hands off!" The insurgent snapped at Rose, as if she was the aggressor. Rose twisted, furious and terrified, and her scarf shifted a fraction. Levy's hand flew up and shoved it back into place. "Keep it," she whispered, frantic. Rose's breathing turned ragged. She felt like she was trapped inside her own clothes. Above them, the boots came again. Closer now. The insurgents heard it. Their heads snapped up toward the hatch. The pistol-wielding insurgent hissed, "Gap's closing. Move now." They shoved the line forward again, deeper into the tunnel system, away from the ladder. They moved fast, faster than before. Rose had to half-run to keep up. The lantern light bounced wildly, shadows jerked, water splashed. Pine stumbled again, pain catching him, and an insurgent kicked him forward. Pine almost went down, caught himself at the last second. Rose heard Pine's breath, harsh and strained, and it scared her more than the insurgent's words. Breathing like that meant something was wrong inside him. They reached another junction where the tunnels split. One branch climbed slightly and smelled less like rot. The other dipped into deeper damp. The insurgents chose the climb. As they moved, Rose began to hear a faint new sound. Not from above. A voice. Muffled at first, then clearer as they climbed. A radio voice. Not Coinwave this time. Different. Shorter bursts. The kind of clipped talk Rose had heard from nights on patrol.
2 squads. Sweep east. Confirmed cellar cleared. Hostages moved. Track water trail. Boot marks.
Rose's head snapped up. Her heart slammed. Levy heard it too. She squeezed Rose's hand so hard, Rose's fingers hurt. Pine's eyes flashed, and for the first time since the market, Rose saw something like hope in his face. The insurgents heard it and swore. "Nights in the tunnels," one muttered. "Quiet!" The pistol-wielding one snapped. "Move!" They climbed faster. The tunnel narrowed, and then opened into an old maintenance corridor with a broken service door at the end. The door was half off its hinges. Light leaked in through the crack. The insurgents forced the captives through. Rose stepped into a different kind of darkness. Not underground darkness. Building darkness. They were inside another abandoned structure, probably connected to the sewer system for old maintenance. The air was dusty, less wet. The smell was old plaster and stale smoke. A staircase led up. The insurgents pushed them up. Rose's legs shook with exhaustion. Levy's breath was getting worse, shallow and tight. Pine's face was pale under grime.
At the top of the stairs,
The insurgents paused again.
the pistol-wielding insurgent
Pressed his ear to the wall.
for a moment,
Everything was still.
then
A sound hit the building.
a heavy impact.
A door slam or a boot against wood somewhere nearby. It made the dust in the air jump.
A voice followed.
Loud and hard, muffled through walls, but clear enough to carry authority.
Meadwin Knights, drop your weapons. Hand over hostages.
Rose's heart,
Leapt into her throat.
Pine's head.
Snapped up.
Levy's eyes.
Filled with tears she didn't let fall.
The insurgents reacted like a
Kicked nest. One of them grabbed Rose's sleeve and yanked her toward the back of the room. Another shoved Pine toward a corner, weapon raised, ready to use him as cover. The pistol-wielding insurgent hissed orders.
positions.
If they breach, we shoot. If they don't, we slip.
Rose's breath came in quick pulls.
Her mind couldn't keep up. Knights were here. Knights were real. Knights were close enough to hear through walls.
She wanted to scream for them.
She wanted to shout her name. She wanted to shout her father's name, her mother's name.
Levy's mouth.
Pressed to Rose's hood. No, she whispered. No sound.
Rose trembled.
But they'll save us.
Levy's voice.
Broke slightly. They will, if we survive the next minute.
The building shook again.
A stronger impact. Something breaking.
The night voice.
Sounded again. Closer. Last warning.
The insurgents' faces.
Were tight with panic now. Panic made them sloppy. Sloppy made them dangerous.
The pistol-wielding insurgent
Grabbed Rose by the back of her coat and jerked her close, pressing the pistol to the side of her head.
Rose froze.
Her whole body turned to ice.
Pine
Surged forward, cable ties clinking. Don't,
The insurgent
snarled. Then tell them to stop.
Rose could smell the gun oil.
She could feel the cold metal through her hood fabric. She couldn't breathe right.
Levy reached for Rose.
Hands trembling, but another insurgent shoved Levy back.
The pistol-wielding
Insurgent shouted toward the door, voice booming now.
back off or the kid dies. Silence followed.
A thick, heavy silence where you could feel the knights deciding what to do.
Rose's eyes.
Squeezed shut. She thought of the lantern again. She thought of the mark on her back. She thought of the insurgent's earlier whisper. Think. Change it. Twist it.
Rose tried to think of the gun vanishing,
Of the pistol turning into dust. Of the world bending.
Nothing happened. The pistol stayed. Her fear stayed. The silence broke
With a different voice, calm and hard. A night voice that sounded closer and older.
You harm a child in Meadwin and you do not leave this street breathing.
The words landed like a sentence. Rose heard the insurgent swallow. His grip tightened. Then, from somewhere outside, another sound rose. A distant roar of engines. Aircraft far above, crossing the city line. It was faint, but unmistakable.
The insurgent with the pistol
Glanced upward instinctively, as if he could see through ceiling and sky.
Rose didn't know what the
Sound meant yet.
She just felt the tension shift again.
The way the whole city seemed to hold its breath.
The insurgent hissed
To his men, we slip now. Through the back. Use the kid.
Lavy's face went dead white.
Rose, she whispered, voice shaking. Hold on to me if you can.
Rose nodded.
Barely able to move.
Behind the wall,
The knights moved. Boots. Real boots. Heavy and close.
and Rose understood something.
With a sick clarity.
Rescue was here.
That did not mean safety was here.
Part 5.
The moment the sky starts participating.
The gun against Rose's head.
Was cold, even through fabric.
She could feel it through the hood.
Through layers that were supposed to protect her from eyes and questions. The metal pressed into the side of her skull like a simple fact.
This is where you are.
This is how small you are.
Her breath kept catching.
Shallow and fast, and every time she inhaled, the scarf tugged tighter at her throat. It felt like the cloth and the gun were working together, one choking her slowly, the other promising speed. The insurgent's hand at her collar tightened every time a sound came from the door. He held her like a handle, like luggage, like something you grabbed when you needed to move fast. Behind the wall, the knights were close enough now that Rose could hear individual footsteps, not just the weight of them. A boot shifted. Lever creaked. A voice murmured, low, measured, aimed at somebody just out of Rose's view. The words didn't carry clearly, but the tone did, calm and hard. The kind of calm that wasn't peace. It was control. The pistol-wielding insurgent shouted again, voice cracking with the strain of being brave. "Back off! You hear me? Back off!" His breath smelled sour. Fear does that to people. It makes their bodies sour. It makes them leak. Rose's eyes were wide and wet, staring at nothing in particular, because looking at anything made the world feel too real. Levy was right there, half a step away, arms lifted slightly like she wanted to grab Rose and couldn't. Her face had that tight, dead white look of someone holding themselves together with sheer will. Blood had dried along her hairline. One shoulder sat wrong. Her jaw trembled when she tried to speak without making sound. Pine was pinned to the side by another insurgent's rifle muzzle, hands bound tight, wrists swollen where the cable ties cut in. His face was pale beneath grime, and sweat shone at his temple. His eyes never left Rose. He watched her like he could keep her breathing just by looking hard enough. Rose tried to swallow. The scarf fought her. She made a tiny sound, a trapped hiccup. The insurgent jerked her closer. "Quiet," he hissed into her hood. "You make noise, you make it worse." Rose's hands came up instinctively, clutching the scarf. She wanted to pull it down just to breathe. She didn't. She couldn't. Levy's earlier whisper, "Keep it up," had dug into her brain so deep it felt like a rule carved into her bones. The knights spoke again outside. A different voice this time, closer to the door, deeper, clipped like he was used to giving orders in storms.
Drop the weapon. Slide it away. Walk out with your hands open.
The insurgent laughed, short and ugly. "You think I'm stupid?" There was a pause. Rose could feel the air in the room thicken in that pause. The knights were thinking. The insurgents were thinking. Everybody was doing math in their head about angles and triggers and how much a child's life weighed. The night voice answered, steady.
I think you're desperate.
The pistol pressed into Rose's head harder. The insurgent's hand shook. The shaking made the pressure change, and that made Rose's stomach roll. She didn't want to die because a scared man's finger twitched. The insurgent barked behind him, the one with the rifle on Pine. "We're boxed." The pistol-wielding one snapped back. "We're not. We got the back." Rose's heart jumped. Back where? Back door. Back route. Back alley. It didn't matter. It meant movement. It meant they were about to be dragged again. The pistol-wielding insurgent leaned toward the others, still keeping the gun at Rose's head, and whispered harshly, "We slip. Now, use the kid. They don't shoot through the kid." Rose heard the words, and her body went numb. Pine's voice broke loose, raw and low. "Don't." The rifle-wielding insurgent shoved the muzzle harder into Pine's chest. "Shut it." Levy's lips moved. Rose couldn't hear the words at first. Then Lavy leaned close to Rose's hood. So close, Rose could feel her mother's breath against the scarf. "Rose," Levy whispered, voice shaking. "You listen to me. You breathe. You do what he says until I say otherwise. You understand?" Rose nodded, frantic and silent. Levy's fingers brushed Rose's coat at the back, right where the fabric had been yanked down earlier. Rose felt the touch, like a reminder of something she didn't fully understand. A mark, a story, A reason men kept looking at her like she was a problem and a prize at the same time.
Levi swallowed,
Then whispered again, almost a hiss. "Keep your thoughts quiet." Rose didn't understand that either, but she nodded again because it sounded like a rule, and rules were the only things holding her together. The door at the front of the building shook.
It wasn't a full breach yet.
It was a push, a test, a shoulder into wood, a check for weakness. The insurgents reacted instantly. "Move!" The pistol-wielding one snarled.
He jerked Rose backward,
dragging her toward the rear of the maintenance corridor. Rose stumbled, boots scraping on dusty floor. Her shoulder hit a pipe. Pain shot down her arm.
Levi lunged to follow,
but an insurgent grabbed her by the coat sleeve and yanked her hard. Her injured shoulder flared. Levi bit back a cry and shoved forward anyway, dragging herself and Rose together as if the two of them were stitched.
Pine tried to move with them,
but the rifle-wielding insurgent shoved him sideways, forcing him into the rear position. The insurgent wanted Pine behind, wanted him as cover, wanted him as punishment if the knights shot.
Rose's world
narrowed into a hallway.
Old pipes, dust, a dead service light
swinging slightly from the ceiling. Useless.
A door at the end,
half hidden behind a shelf that had been shoved aside long ago.
The pistol-wielding insurgent
kicked that door open with his heel. It banged against the wall, cracked plaster falling in a little puff. Cold outside air rushed in.
A back stairwell, a narrow set of steps
leading up to street level.
The insurgent
shoved Rose toward the stairs. Up!
Rose's boots
hit the first step and slid slightly on grit.
Levi grabbed Rose's coat strap.
"Careful," she whispered.
Rose climbed,
legs shaking.
Behind them,
the front door took another hit. Wood groaned. Dust drifted in the hallway like ash.
The night voice boomed again.
Closer now, loud enough to shake the space.
"Midwin Knights, drop the weapon."
The pistol-wielding insurgent laughed again, but the laugh was strained, and Rose could hear the fear in it.
He shoved Rose higher.
"Move! Move!"
They climbed fast.
Rose's breath burned in her throat. The scarf trapped warmth and panic together.
At the top of the stairs,
another door. This one was metal, dented, with a broken latch. The insurgent shoved it open.
Light
hit Rose's eyes.
Grey daylight.
Wet street. The smell of smoke and damp brick. They spilled out into an alley behind the building. The alley was a thin slit between two structures, piled with debris. A broken cart, old crates, trash bags torn open and spilling. A puddle that reflected the sky in a dirty smear.
Rose blinked hard.
She could see again, and seeing made everything worse. Seeing made the danger have edges. The insurgent pressed the gun to Rose's head again and shouted toward the alley mouth, voice high with adrenaline.
"Don't follow,
or she dies." The words weren't aimed at the knights now. The words were aimed at the city. Somewhere beyond the alley mouth, boots slapped pavement. Knights moving around the front, trying to wrap the building, trying to cut roots.
Rose could hear them.
Closer than ever, a night voice shouted from somewhere to the right.
"Back alley. They're moving her."
Another voice answered, tighter.
"Hold fire! Hold! We need a line!" A radio crackled nearby.
Not the civilian band. Night comms. Quick bursts, clipped words.
2 hostiles, 1 child, 1 adult female injured, 1 adult male bound. Confirm shaded mark reported.
Static.
Then a reply Rose didn't fully catch. It came with a different tone, cautious, like even trained voices had superstition tucked behind them.
Rose's stomach flipped.
They were talking about her, about the thing on her back, about something she did not remember getting, something she had carried without knowing.
The insurgent heard the comms too.
His eyes flicked to Rose's coat back like he expected the fabric to glow.
"Keep her tight,"
he snapped at the others.
Levi was pulled forward into the alley,
limping. Pine followed, shoved hard, hands still bound. His face twisted with pain when his ribs took the impact of a shove. They moved as a cluster down the alley. The insurgents wanted to stay close to walls. No open street. No clear line for a knight's rifle. They moved like rats in a maze. Rose's mind kept trying to leap to hope. Knights were here, knights were close, knights had voices she could hear. Then the gun pressed harder. Then her hope folded back into fear. A passing car somewhere on the next street had its radio loud. The voice burst through a broken window and into the alley in fragments.
Midwind Coinwave Emergency Band. Timestamp October 1st, year 22137. Knights engaged with hostile cell. Citizens advised to shelter. Avoid lower stone screening points. Reports of fever in...
Static swallowed the rest. Levy's body tightened at the word fever. Rose felt it in the way her mother's hand gripped her sleeve harder, like the word itself had claws. They reached the alley mouth. Beyond it, a side street ran parallel to the market district. Wet pavement, scattered debris, a few burned-out cars. Farther down, people peeked from doorways, faces half hidden. Nobody stepping out, nobody wanting to be in the open. And there, at the far end of the side street, 2 Medwin knights stepped into view. Rose had seen knights on rooftops before, silhouettes. She had never seen them this close. They looked heavier than humans. Dark armor, layered, scarred. Helmets with visors that hid faces, crest marks on shoulders. Rifles held with quiet ease, muzzles down but ready to rise. They moved like they owned the street, and the street agreed with them. One knight raised a hand, palm open, a gesture that meant stop. The other angled slightly, trying to get a line without looking like he was getting a line. Rose wanted to cry with relief. The insurgent holding her snarled, "Back! Back or she's gone!" The knight who had raised his hand spoke, voice steady and loud enough to carry.
Let the child go. You walk away and you get a chance.
The insurgent laughed, breath ragged. Chance from you. The knight's visor stayed fixed on Rose.
That child is Midwin.
The insurgent's grip tightened. Rose whimpered. The pistol pressed into her head so hard she felt the hood fabric bite into her skin. Pine made a sound, low and furious. He tried to step forward, to pull Rose out of the line of fire, but the rifle-wielding insurgent shoved him back and jammed a boot into Pine's bound wrists. Pine's knees nearly folded. He stayed upright by pure stubbornness. Levy hissed, "Pine." Pine's eyes didn't leave Rose. "I'm here," he rasped. The knights didn't advance. They couldn't. They were doing math again, and the math said, 1 wrong step, and Rose's skull meets a bullet. The knight with the open hand spoke again, calmer now, softer, as if he was trying to lower the temperature of the moment.
Listen to me. You can still breathe your way out of this. You hand her over. You drop the weapon. You live long enough to regret it.
The pistol-wielding insurgent's eyes flicked, quick, searching for exits. He saw what the knights were doing, containing, narrowing. He didn't like it. "Move!" he hissed to his crew. They pulled back into the alley, dragging the family with them, refusing to stand in the open street. The knights followed at a distance, careful, measured, stopping at the alley mouth. Rose glanced over her shoulder and saw the knights' rifles come up slightly, then dip again. They were tracking. They were waiting. They were trapped by the fact that Rose existed between them and the men they wanted to kill. The insurgents shoved them deeper into the alley, then turned into a courtyard behind another set of buildings. The courtyard looked like it used to be a loading bay. Now it was a junk pit. A cracked concrete pad, rusting metal frames, stacks of broken pallets, a half-collapsed awning, and a van. Old, boxy, dented, with mismatched doors and a tarp tied over the rear window. The kind of vehicle that still ran because somebody loved it more than they loved comfort. Rose's heart sank at the sight of it. Vehicles meant distance. Vehicles meant they could vanish.
The insurgent barked.
In! He pointed the gun at Rose's head and shoved her toward the van's side door. Rose froze. Please!
He shoved harder.
Now!
Levy stepped forward first.
Trying to place her body between Rose and the van door. She goes with me.
The insurgent
Slammed the pistol into Lavi's shoulder, right where it already hurt. Lavi cried out, staggered, but she didn't fall.
Pine made a choked
Sound and surged again, but the rifle-wielding insurgent yanked Pine backward and shoved him to his knees.
Rose screamed.
Stop!
The shout
Echoed off brick.
from the alley mouth.
A night voice shouted, closer now, urgent.
Hands. I need hands. I need a clear line.
Another night voice, lower, replied.
Hold. Kid is too close.
Rose could hear their boots shift.
They were coming in. Slow. Careful.
The pistol-wielding insurgent
Glanced back, panic flashing across his face. He shoved Rose into the van door with enough force that her shoulder hit metal and pain flared.
Rose.
Stumbled into the van.
It smelled like old oil.
Wet cloth and sweat that had soaked into seats for years. The inside was dark, lit only by the grey light from the open door.
Levy climbed in right behind her.
One arm wrapping Rose tight. Stay down, Levy whispered.
Rose dropped to the floor of the van.
Knees hitting metal. She curled up. She could feel the vibration of the city through the vehicle frame.
Pine
Was shoved toward the van next. The insurgents grabbed him by the shoulders and hauled him up, forcing him forward.
Pine stumbled into the van.
Bound hands first. He fell hard onto one knee, then forced himself upright, breathing through pain.
Rose lunged toward him.
Dad!
Pine twisted.
And pressed his bound wrists against Rose's shoulder, an awkward touch that still meant everything. I'm here.
The van door
Slammed part way, then reopened slightly as an insurgent leaned in.
The pistol-wielding one
Pointed the gun into the van now, keeping all three of them in his control. His eyes flicked over Rose again.
Keep that scarf up.
He snarled, and it came out like an insult and a fear at the same time.
Rose's fingers tightened on the scarf automatically.
The insurgent backed out and shouted at his driver. Start it!
The engine coughed once.
Then sputtered, then caught.
The sound
Filled the courtyard, loud and desperate.
from the alley mouth.
The knights moved. Rose could hear boots running now, a shift from careful to urgent.
A night voice shouted.
Vehicle! Vehicle! Block it!
Another voice answered.
Too late.
The van lurched. Rose's body
Slammed sideways into Levy's legs. Levy grunted, arm tightening around Rose's shoulders to keep her from cracking her head.
Pine braced himself.
With bound hands and shoulder against the van wall, teeth clenched.
The van rolled forward toward the courtyard exit.
Tires splashing through a shallow puddle.
Rose's eyes
Darted to the small rear window covered by tarp. She could see nothing but grey smear.
Then the van's front swung.
And through the side gap at the door seam, Rose caught a glimpse of the knights.
They were closer now.
3, maybe 4, dark armor moving fast. One knight raised a rifle, then lowered it again, refusing the shot because the van carried a child.
Rose wanted to scream at them.
Please, do something.
Her throat closed.
No sound came out.
The pistol-wielding
Insurgent ran alongside the van for a few steps, then grabbed the edge of the side door and hauled himself in. He slammed it shut behind him, sealing them in the dark.
Inside,
only the faintest light seeped through cracks. The insurgent sat across from them on a bench seat, pistol still in hand, breathing hard. He stared at Rose like she was the reason the world was complicated.
He spoke to her through gritted teeth.
You had to be special.
Rose didn't answer.
She didn't know what to say. She didn't want to be anything. The van hit a pothole, and everyone bounced. Pain shot through Rose's shoulder again. Levy hissed. Pine grunted. The insurgent's eyes flicked to Pine's bound hands. "Talk," he said. "You tell me where the nights rotate. You tell me which bunkers are real, or I start taking things you care about."
Pine's voice was raw.
"You already took my kid," the insurgent leaned forward. "I can take more."
Levy's breath came fast.
"Leave him alone."
The insurgent's face twisted.
"You got a lot of courage for somebody bleeding."
He lifted the pistol slightly.
Not pointing directly yet, but enough to make the threat visible. "You want me to prove something?"
Rose felt her body shake.
She pressed closer to Levy,
Pine shifted.
bound wrists scraping the floor as he tried to place himself in front of Rose in the cramped space. He couldn't fully. There wasn't room. There was never enough room when you needed it. Outside, the van accelerated. Rose heard the city blur into sound through the van walls. Passing vehicles, shouts, a distant rifle crack. The world moving too fast. A radio somewhere outside leaked faintly through the van's metal, distorted by distance and interference.
Coinwave. Knights in pursuit. Hostages. Avoid screening points. Fever.
Static. Then another line, faint as a whisper.
Air activity over South Coin.
Rose's stomach tightened at the mention of air. She remembered the distant roar earlier, the sound that had made everyone tense. The insurgent across from them heard it too, or maybe he felt the same shift in the van's vibration. He looked up toward the ceiling, like he could see through it.
His jaw worked. "Aircraft,"
He muttered.
Pine's eyes narrowed.
"Whose?"
The insurgent didn't
Answer. He didn't need to. Everybody in Midwin knew aircraft meant someone with power had decided the ground was disposable. The van swerved hard. Rose slammed into Levy's side. Levy grabbed Rose's hood with one hand to keep it from slipping, then winced as her shoulder screamed. Her face tightened, but she didn't let go. Pine braced again, bound hands against the wall, breathing hard. The insurgent cursed. "They're trying to cut us off." Rose heard it then, clearer now, through the van's thin metal. Sirens. Shouts. Boots. The Knights were still close. They had vehicles too. They were chasing. The van hit another pothole and jolted. Something in the back rattled. Metal on metal. Rose's scarf shifted slightly in the jolt. The insurgent's eyes snapped to it instantly. He leaned forward, sudden and sharp, and grabbed Rose's scarf with 2 fingers, yanking it tighter and higher than it already was. Rose choked, eyes watering.
"Keep it up," he snarled.
Like he hated saying it, like he hated that he cared at all. "I don't want to look at whatever you are." Levy's hand shot out, slapping his wrist away. "Don't touch her." The insurgent's face went red. He raised his pistol, and for a heartbeat, Rose thought he would shoot Levy right there in the van. Pine's voice cut through, low and desperate. Don't do it." The insurgent held the pistol aimed at Levy for a long, shaking second. Then the van lurched again, and the moment broke. The insurgent lowered the gun, breathing hard, and spat words instead of bullets. "You two are going to get yourselves killed," he hissed, "and you're going to take her with you." Rose's eyes burned. She couldn't stop shaking. Levy whispered into Rose's hood, so quiet it almost wasn't sound. "Breathe. Rose, breathe." Rose tried. The scarf fought her, but she tried. Then the whole world outside made a new sound. A heavy, rising roar that cut through everything, like the sky itself had dropped closer. The van's engine noise became small under it. Rose's heart slammed. She knew that sound now. Aircraft overhead, closer than before. Not just passing far away, low enough that the vibration got into the van's bones. The insurgent's face changed. His bravado cracked. His eyes went wide in a way that had nothing to do with knights.
Get under something,
He muttered, as if he forgot for a second that he was a captor and they were hostages.
Pine's voice came out tight.
What's happening?
The insurgent didn't answer.
He stared upward again, listening, counting, waiting for the drop that everybody feared. Outside, a distant boom rolled across the city.
What a close impact.
Far, but heavy enough that the van's windows rattled.
Rose felt it in her teeth.
Another boom followed, closer.
The van's driver
Shouted something muffled from the front, panic in his voice.
The van swerved again,
Almost tipping.
the insurgent
Grabbed the bench seat to steady himself, pistol still in hand, knuckles white.
Levy's eyes.
Locked on Pine's.
In that look,
Rose saw it. The understanding. The terrible math.
mid-rescue. Bombs.
The sky didn't care about hostages. The sky didn't care about knights. The sky didn't care about a little girl with a scarf pulled too high. The sky only cared that someone had decided this part of Midwin was worth burning.
The van rattled.
As another distant blast rolled. Closer now. Much closer.
Dust.
Sifted from somewhere in the van's ceiling seam, sprinkling down on Rose's hood like dirty snow.
Rose whispered,
Voice almost gone. Mom?
Levy pressed her forehead to Rose's hood
For one heartbeat, then lifted her head and forced her voice steady. Hold on, she whispered. Whatever happens next, you hold on.
outside,
The roar overhead grew louder,
and the van kept
moving, trapped between nights behind and the sky above, deciding where fire would land.
Part 6.
The van becomes a coffin, and the street becomes the judge.
The roar overhead.
Got so loud, it stopped being sound and started being pressure,
Rose felt it in her chest first.
like a hand pushing down on her ribs. The van's thin metal skin vibrated. The bolts in the door rattled. Even the air inside seemed to tremble, trapped and angry.
The insurgent across from them
Stopped talking. His mouth hung open slightly, like he was listening to something older than him, something that didn't care about his plans.
outside.
Another boom rolled across the city, closer this time. The van's windows shuddered. Dust sifted from seams and fell onto Rose's hood and into Levy's hair.
The driver shouted from the front.
Voice muffled through metal.
They're dropping! They're dropping!
Levy sucked in a sharp breath.
Pine's
Eyes locked on hers, and Rose saw something pass between them that she couldn't name. A shared fear that was bigger than insurgents, bigger than gunfire. It was the fear of the sky.
The insurgent with the pistol muttered,
Almost to himself, who the hell bombs a city while they're trying to take hostages?
Pine's voice was raw.
People who want the city scared. The insurgent snapped back, but it didn't have his earlier bite. Shut up! The van lurched hard to the left. Rose slammed into Levy's side. Levy's injured shoulder hit the van wall, and she made a strangled noise, pain tearing out of her before she could swallow it. She grabbed Rose anyway, arm clamping around her like a belt.
Pine tried to brace.
Bound hands pressing against the floor, but the van jerked again and threw him into the bench seat. His bruised ribs took the hit. His face went pale, eyes squeezing shut for a second.
Rose watched him,
and her throat tightened so hard she couldn't breathe right.
Dad,
She whispered.
I'm here.
Pine rasped back. He didn't sound sure. He sounded like he was forcing the words out because Rose needed them.
The roar overhead.
Shifted. It dipped lower. Rose could tell even without seeing. It felt closer, heavier, like the aircraft were passing directly over this street now. A new sound cut in, faint and broken through the van's body.
A radio.
Someone outside had it loud. The voice spilled into the van in chopped pieces through the thin panels.
Coin Wave Emergency Band. Timestamp October 1st, Year 22137. Air Raid Advisory. Take cover. Take cover.
Static.
8 the rest.
Air Raid Advisory.
Rose's stomach dropped. She'd heard those words before, but always far away, always as something for other districts. Now, it was in her bones.
The insurgent with the pistol
Snapped his head toward the ceiling again, as if he could see the planes through it. His hands tightened on the gun.
Down!
He ordered, reflexively, then remembered he was the one with the weapon, and they were the ones trapped. He leaned forward, face twisted. You three, down!
Levy didn't need the order.
She pulled Rose flat to the van floor, pressing her body over Rose as much as she could. Rose's cheek hit cold metal. The smell of old oil filled her nose.
Pine tried to lower himself too,
But cable ties made it awkward. He managed to crouch, then tipped onto his side, shoulders hunched, bound hands pulled close to his chest. The van hit something hard, a jolt that threw everyone up, even though they were trying to stay down. Metal screamed against metal. The van skidded, tires squealed, the engine revved, then choked.
Rose's head.
Snapped sideways and hit the floor with a bright flash of pain.
She cried out.
But the sound came out muffled under Levy's coat.
The insurgent
Cursed violently. Driver!
The driver shouted back.
Panicked.
Street's blocked! Rubble! I can't!
Rubble. Bomb debris. A collapsed wall. A crater. Rose didn't know which. She only felt the van stop moving, and the moment it stopped, she felt the danger change shape.
A moving cage.
Could still run.
A stopped cage.
Became a target.
Outside.
The sound of boots rose again.
Close now.
Close enough that Rose could hear the slap of wet soles on pavement.
Knights. The van rocked
As somebody slammed into its side. A shouted command cut through the chaos, loud and close.
Meadwin Knights, out of the vehicle, now.
The insurgent with the pistol
Flinched, like the voice struck him.
He yanked himself upright.
Gun coming up, eyes wild. He grabbed Rose by the coat collar and dragged her up with him.
Rose's scarf
Tightened again, choking her. She clawed at it, trying to breathe. Levy surged up too, moving on instinct, getting between Rose and the gun as best she could in the cramped space. She took the pistol's muzzle against her shoulder for a second, then the insurgent shoved her away.
Pine twisted.
Forcing himself up, face contorted with pain and fury. Don't touch her.
The insurgent's voice
Came out loud, shaking. They won't shoot if I keep her up.
Rose's eyes.
Darted to the van door.
It was still shut. But daylight.
Leaked through cracks.
Outside.
Another impact rolled through the city, much closer now. The boom was so heavy it turned into a punch. The van's frame rattled. The driver screamed.
Rose heard glass
Breaking somewhere outside.
A knight shouted.
Sharper now.
Airstrike, get down!
The insurgent with the pistol
Didn't get down. He shoved Rose toward the door instead, dragging her like a shield.
Open it!
He screamed at the driver.
The driver fumbled.
Metal clanked. The side door latch popped.
Daylight blasted in. Rose blinked hard.
And saw the street in a blur of grey and motion.
She saw a knight at the edge of the door.
Armor dark and wet, rifle up, but not aimed at her. Visor turned toward Rose's face, as if the knight was trying to see past the hood and scarf without tearing them away.
She saw another knight behind.
Angled for cover.
She saw a third knight.
Crouched low near a burned-out car, arm raised, signaling.
And she saw civilians.
Pressed into doorways, watching like ghosts.
The insurgent
Shoved Rose out of the van first.
Rose
Stumbled down to the street, boots splashing in a puddle. Her knees buckled. She caught herself with her hands.
Cold water
Soaked her gloves.
The insurgent
Stepped out right behind her, pistol pressed tight to the back of her head now, using her small body like a wall.
Back! He screamed at the knights.
Back, or she's done!
The knight closest to the door
didn't move forward. He didn't move back. His voice came calm, measured, like he was speaking to a cornered animal.
Easy, easy. Nobody's moving.
Rose could hear his breathing through the visor.
Even knights breathed hard when bombs were falling.
Lavi was shoved out next.
She nearly fell. Her shoulder made her twist wrong, and she caught herself against the van's doorframe, gasping.
Pine came last.
Dragged by an insurgent who kept a rifle jammed into Pine's spine.
Pine hit the street
And straightened immediately, even with his hands bound. His eyes locked on Rose. Rose's eyes locked back.
for a heartbeat.
The street narrowed into just the three of them.
Pine's face
Said everything he couldn't speak. Stay alive. Stay covered. Stay close.
Lavi's face was pale.
Eyes fierce. Her lips moved. Rose heard it anyway.
I love you. Rose's throat closed. The roar overhead returned.
Lower again.
A new whistle cut through the air. A sound that wasn't a plane.
Something falling.
Time slowed
In a way Rose would remember forever.
The knights reacted first.
They moved like their bodies knew what the sound meant before their minds caught up.
One knight shouted.
Down!
Another shouted.
Cover!
The insurgent holding Rose hesitated. He looked up. That hesitation lasted half a second.
That half second,
Saved Rose's life.
Pine moved. He couldn't run properly with his hands bound,
But he threw himself forward anyway, shoulder slamming into the insurgent's ribs. The pistol jerked away from Rose's head.
Rose fell
Sideways, hard, rolling in wet grit.
Levi lunged at the same time,
Grabbing Rose's coat and yanking her toward the ground, toward the shadow of the van, toward anything that might block shrapnel.
The insurgents screamed.
And swung the pistol wildly, trying to bring it back onto Rose.
Pine, bound hands and all,
Smashed his shoulder into the insurgent again, forcing him off balance.
the insurgent's pistol fired. The crack was deafening at this distance.
Rose felt it in her skull.
The shot went wide.
A shard of brick exploded from a wall behind them.
Then
The bomb hit.
it didn't hit the van. It hit close enough.
That it didn't matter.
A blast rolled down the street like a wall. The sound wasn't just loud.
It was total. It swallowed everything. It turned the air into violence.
Rose's body
Lifted off the ground for a split second and then slammed back down. Her ears rang instantly, sharp and high. She couldn't hear her own scream.
heat punched her face.
Grit and dust blasted over her hood. The scarf saved her mouth from filling with debris, but it also made it harder to breathe as the air turned thick.
The van rocked.
Metal groaned. A window blew out somewhere, and glass rained like sharp ice.
Rose's eyes.
Squeezed shut. She curled into herself.
Levi covered her.
Rose felt Levi's body press tighter, a desperate shield.
Something hit Levi's back hard.
Levi made a sound that Rose felt more than heard, a choking gasp.
Pine was
Somewhere close. Rose couldn't see, couldn't hear properly, only felt the vibrations and the weight of bodies and the brutal heat of the blast.
When the shockwave passed,
There was a moment of eerie emptiness. Then the world returned in pieces.
Rose's hearing
Came back like water dripping into a cracked cup. First a faint ringing, then muffled shouting, then the rough scrape of boots, then the crackle of radios.
She coughed and tasted dust.
Her eyes burned,
She tried to push up.
but Levi was still over her.
Mom?
Rose croaked.
Levi didn't move. Rose's stomach flipped.
Mom! She tried again, louder, but her voice was weak.
A hand grabbed Rose's shoulder. Rose jerked, terrified. A knight.
Dark armor close, visor inches from her hood. The knight's hands were gloved and careful, but urgent.
Child,
The knight said.
Voice tight.
can you move?
Rose's eyes darted past the knight.
And she saw Levi,
Levi was still curled over her.
but her body had gone slack in a way Rose recognized without wanting to. Blood was spreading through the back of Levy's coat, dark and fast. Rose made a sound that was pure panic.
"She's hurt!"
Rose screamed, trying to crawl toward Levy.
The knight's hand
Tightened gently but firmly, holding Rose in place.
Stay with me.
Rose fought, clawing at the street. "Mom!" Another knight moved in from the side and knelt near Levy. He pulled at Levy's coat carefully, checking, trying to find breath, trying to find life. Rose saw the knight's head tilt, as if listening for a heartbeat. Then the knight's shoulders dropped a fraction. Rose's breath stopped. Her throat refused air. "No," Rose whispered. The second knight looked up briefly, visor turning toward Rose. He didn't speak.
He didn't need to.
Rose's body went cold. Pine's voice tore through the noise. "Rose!" Rose snapped her head toward the sound. Pine was on his knees a few feet away, hands still bound, face streaked with dust and blood. One of the insurgents lay crumpled near him, not moving. Another insurgent was crawling, clutching a leg that bent wrong. The pistol-wielding insurgent was gone, either thrown by the blast or already running. Pine tried to crawl toward Rose, toward Levy. A knight grabbed Pine's shoulder.
Sir, stay down.
Pine snarled like an animal. "That's my wife!" He tried to surge forward. The knight held him. Not cruel, just controlling. Because another roar overhead cut through the street again. More aircraft. More bombs. They weren't done. The first knight who had grabbed Rose shouted into his radio, voice urgent.
Hostage child located. Adult female down. Adult male bound. Need evac now. Air raid ongoing.
Static spit back. Then a reply came in clipped bursts.
Evac route to Bunker Gate 3. Move now. Repeat. Move now.
Bunker. Rose's mind latched onto the word the way a drowning person grabs floating wood. Bunker meant safety. Bunker meant thick doors. Bunker meant the bombs might not reach her. But Levy was on the ground, not moving. Rose's body tried to crawl back toward her anyway, desperate, refusing reality. The knight pulled Rose up, arms under her, lifting her with careful strength. Rose thrashed, crying, fists hitting the knight's armor uselessly. "Put me down! That's my mom!" The knight's voice softened just a fraction.
I'm sorry.
He said, and the words sounded real, like he meant them. Rose's hood shifted as she fought. The scarf slipped a little. Cold air hit her ear. Levy's hand wasn't there to fix it. Rose's panic spiked. She grabbed the scarf with both hands and yanked it back up, sobbing, breath ragged. Pine screamed again, raw and breaking. "Rose!" Rose twisted in the knight's arms and looked at her father. Pine's eyes met hers. Rose had never seen her father cry. He was crying now. Dust streaked the tears down his face. His mouth moved like he was trying to speak and couldn't find words sturdy enough. He fought the knight holding him, and the knight let him move closer by inches. Just enough. Pine crawled, bound hands scraping street, until he was close enough to touch Rose's boot. His voice came out cracked. "Rose," he whispered, "listen. Listen to me." Rose sobbed. "Dad, Mom won't move." Pine's face tightened like he was holding himself together with nails. He nodded once, small and broken. "I know," he whispered. Rose shook her head hard. "Fix it." Pine's eyes squeezed shut for a heartbeat. When he opened them again, they were furious with the universe. "I can't," he said, voice barely there. Rose's whole body shook. Pine leaned closer. His bound hands lifted as much as they could, and he pressed his knuckles against Rose's coat sleeve, a clumsy touch that still felt like home. "You go with them," Pine whispered. "You go to the bunker. You do what they say." Rose's voice rose into a scream. "No! I'm staying with you!" Pine's jaw clenched so hard it looked like it might crack. "Rose," he said, sharper now, You do what I say. Rose froze at the tone. It was the tone he used only when something mattered more than feelings. Pine's voice dropped again, shaking. You're going to live. You hear me? You're going to live. Rose's eyes darted to Levi again. The blood spreading. The stillness. Rose's stomach churned. Pine followed her gaze, and his face crumpled for a split second. Then he forced it back into something firm, something that could hold Rose upright.
Look at me,
Pine ordered softly.
Rose turned back. Pine's eyes locked on hers.
You keep that scarf up, he whispered. You keep your hood up. You stay with the knights.
Rose's breath hitched.
What about you?
Pine swallowed hard.
He glanced toward the street end, where more explosions flashed in the distance, lighting the grey day with brief orange bruises. He glanced up at the aircraft roar. Then he looked back at Rose.
His voice went
Quiet, deadly sincere. I'm going to buy you time.
Rose didn't understand at first.
Then she did, and it hit her like another bomb.
No, she whispered. Pine's mouth tightened.
Rose, he said, and his voice was almost gentle. I promised your mother I would keep you alive. Rose shook her head hard, crying. Come with me. Pine's eyes flicked toward the knights, toward their radios, toward their urgent movements, toward the reality that the street was becoming a slaughterhouse.
He whispered.
I can't. I have to keep them focused on me. I have to keep you moving. The knight holding Pine tried to pull him back.
Sir, we have to move. Air raid is active.
Pine didn't fight the knight.
He looked at Rose one last time and forced a small smile that looked like it hurt his face.
Hey, he whispered.
Remember the rule, Rose sobbed. Keep it up.
Pine nodded.
Keep it up.
Then Pine turned his head slightly,
and Rose saw his eyes shift past her, towards something behind the knights. An insurgent, moving, crawling, reaching for a dropped pistol.
Pine lunged.
Bound hands and all, he slammed his body into the insurgent, knocking him onto his back. Pine drove his bound fists down, pounding with raw strength, desperate to keep the insurgent from firing into the knights, into Rose, into anyone. The insurgent snarled and grabbed Pine's coat. They grappled in the wet grit.
A knight shouted.
Move the child.
The knight holding Rose
tightened his grip and began to run.
Rose screamed,
reaching for Pine, reaching for Levi, reaching for the whole life that was shattering behind her.
The knight carried her anyway.
Rose's vision blurred with tears and dust. She caught a final glimpse over the knight's shoulder.
Pine still fighting on the street,
bound hands swinging like hammers.
Levi still on the ground,
still and bleeding.
And behind them,
another whistling sound cut the air.
Another bomb falling.
Rose's scream broke into a sobbing gasp.
The knights ran. Boots pounding,
radios crackling, voices shouting directions. They cut through side streets where walls were cracked and windows blown out. They moved with the urgency of people who knew the sky had decided to erase whole blocks. Rose clung to the knight's shoulder plate, fingers slipping on wet armor. She couldn't breathe right. The scarf trapped her sobs. She hated it. She clung to it anyway. A civilian car passed at the next intersection, speeding, tires spraying water. Its radio was loud, distorted, frantic.
Coin wave. Air raid advisory. Shelter immediately. Knights escorting civilians to bunkers. Screening points suspended.
Static.
Then a different voice, thin with fear.
World Defense Force contact unavailable.
Rose's stomach twisted again. That phrase followed her like a curse.
They ran past a street
where a building burned, flames licking out of broken windows. People staggered in the road, coughing, dragging bags, dragging children. A knight shoved them aside, gently but firmly, shouting,
"To the bunker! Move!"
Rose saw a child crying in the arms of a man with a bloody face.
The child's mouth moved in a question Rose couldn't hear over the bombing.
Rose knew the question anyway. Who saves us?
The knights turned a corner, and Rose saw it.
A bunker gate
Set into a reinforced concrete wall. Heavy, industrial, with thick hinges. The kind of door made for the end of a world.
Medwin knights
Clustered there, ushering people in fast. Some were wounded, some were carrying toddlers, some had blank eyes, like they'd already left their bodies behind.
A knight at the gate shouted,
Move, move! We close on my call!
The knight carrying Rose pushed through, shouting over the chaos.
"Child hostage! Rose Helveth! We have her!"
The name sounded strange in the open, like it didn't belong to a child. Rose wanted to correct him, to tell him her name wasn't just a hostage label, but her throat was too tight.
They rushed her toward the opening.
Rose twisted again, frantic, trying to look back.
"Dad!" she screamed,
Voice shredded. "Mom!"
No answer came. Only the roar overhead.
And the distant booms.
A knight near the door
Reached out to take Rose. As Rose was passed from one armored set of arms to another, her coat rode up slightly from the movement. Rose felt cold air on her spine.
She didn't notice
Until she saw the way one knight's visor tilted down, a quick glance, then a stiffening.
the knight said nothing.
He only leaned closer to the knight beside him, voice low and fast, words meant to stay inside helmets.
Rose caught fragments as she was carried,
because fear made her ears sharp.
That mark, ring,
And flame,
Halveth line. The other knight replied,
even quieter, a tone that sounded like someone forcing themselves to be practical.
blood like that doesn't just show up.
Rose didn't understand. She barely processed the words. They slid past her like smoke. Then the knights shoved her into the bunker corridor.
The air inside was different.
Cooler, metallic. It smelled like oil and concrete, and too many bodies packed together. It smelled like survival. Rose stumbled as her feet hit solid ground inside.
Her knees buckled.
She caught herself on the wall with shaking hands.
She turned.
Wild-eyed, trying to run back out.
A knight
Blocked her with a broad, armored body.
Rose pounded his chest plate with her fists.
"My parents are out there."
The knight's voice came through his helmet.
Strained.
"We are going to get who we can."
Rose screamed.
"Go! Go now!"
The knight didn't move.
He looked past her toward the door, listening to radio, listening to explosions, doing the brutal math again.
A voice thundered from outside,
An order that cut through the bunker entry like a blade.
Close the gate.
Rose's head
Snapped toward the opening.
outside,
The sky made another falling whistle.
closer, too close. Rose ran toward the door anyway.
But two knights grabbed her, one on each arm, holding her back.
Rose fought like an animal.
Sobbing, kicking, trying to slip free.
"Dad!" she screamed, voice cracking.
"Dad!"
The bunker door
began to move.
It didn't swing gently.
It rolled and shifted with mechanical weight, metal grinding, hinges groaning. It took multiple knights on a crank and lever to pull it closed fast enough.
Rose watched the gap shrink. Through the narrowing slice of daylight,
She saw smoke rolling over streets.
she saw distant figures running.
Too far to identify, too blurred by dust and chaos.
She did not see Pine. She did not see Levy.
The gap narrowed to a slit.
A blast hit
Somewhere outside, bright light flashing across the bunker threshold.
Rose felt heat.
Even inside.
The knights yelled.
"Pull! Pull!"
Metal slammed.
The door sealed with a final brutal sound that Rose felt in her bones.
For a moment,
There was nothing but the echo of that closing inside the bunker corridor, and Rose's sobs tearing out of her like she couldn't stop. Then the blast wave hit the bunker exterior.
the whole structure shuddered.
Dust fell from the ceiling. People screamed. A child cried. A grown man prayed out loud.
Rose collapsed to her knees.
Hands pressed to the cold floor, body shaking. A knight knelt beside her, one armored hand hovering like he wanted to touch her shoulder and didn't know if it was allowed. Rose looked up at him with eyes that didn't look like a child's anymore. In the dim bunker light, her scarf still covered her ears. Her hood still shadowed her face. She was still Rose Halveth, but the world she'd known was burning on the other side of a sealed door. The knight's voice came quietly, almost human, behind the helmet.
You're safe now.
Rose's throat tightened. My mom isn't. The knight didn't answer. Rose whispered. My dad isn't. The knight's shoulders shifted, small and heavy. Somewhere deeper in the bunker, a radio crackled with new orders, distorted but clear enough.
Airstrikes continuing. Hold gates. Triage in Corridor 2. Knights regrouping.
And somewhere on the other side of that metal door, the city kept ending in pieces. Part 7. The bunker eats the city, and Rose learns what panic sounds like indoors. The door shut, and the world did not get quieter. It got closer. Outside, the bombing became a muffled thunder that lived in the walls. Inside, the bunker turned into a throat full of people trying to breathe at the same time. Rose stayed on her knees, hands flat on the concrete floor, fingers spread like she could anchor herself there. The air smelled like cold metal and sweat and old oil. It carried a new scent too, sharp and bitter, the kind that clung to the back of your tongue. Smoke, not inside yet, but close enough that the vents were starting to taste it. Somebody shoved past behind her and stumbled. A body hit the wall with a thud. A child cried somewhere to the left, that wet, choking cry that sounded like it would never stop. A grown man was shouting at a knight, voice cracking, words tumbling on top of each other. My wife is outside. You can't close it. You can't. What are you doing? What are the knights doing? Where is the World Defense Force? Where are they? Where are they? A knight shouted back, firm and strained.
Move to triage! Move now! Gate is sealed!
Rose lifted her head. The corridor stretched away under harsh emergency lights. There were no windows, only concrete and pipes and cables. The lights were white and ugly, and every time the bunker shuddered from an impact outside, the lights flickered like they were blinking at death. People were packed shoulder to shoulder, some were bleeding, some were coated in dust. Some held blankets over their heads like it could help. A man with a torn coat was carrying a limp child, face gray with shock, eyes fixed forward like he was walking in a dream. A medic, not a knight, just a woman with a red patch on her sleeve, grabbed the man and tried to look at the child's face.
She's not breathing.
The man whispered, like he couldn't make the words louder. The medic's hands moved fast, fingers at the child's neck, a quick look at the mouth, a shake of the head that was too small, too practiced.
Corridor 2.
The medic said, voice thick.
Bring her. Now.
The man stumbled forward, clutching the child tighter, like the tighter he held, the more life would return. Rose watched them pass and felt something inside her begin to tear in slow, silent strips. A knight knelt beside Rose again. Same one from the gate, she thought. Same visor, same heavy presence that felt like a wall.
You need to get up.
He said, voice low, trying to be gentle and failing because everything around him was urgency. Rose's voice came out raw. My mum is out there. The knight's head dipped a fraction. He did not say sorry again, maybe because he couldn't bear repeating it.
We have runners.
He said.
We have teams outside. Right now, we have to get you deeper.
Rose shook her head so hard, her hood shifted. Her fingers flew to the scarf and yanked it higher, like the bunker itself was full of eyes. I want my dad, she whispered. A new boom rolled through the bunker wall. The floor vibrated under Rose's palms. A shower of dust drifted from a ceiling seam like dirty snow. People screamed in response, not because they were hit, but because the sound reminded them they could be. Somebody shouted.
They're bombing the gate.
Another voice yelled.
The bunker holds.
Another voice, a woman's voice, hysterical.
It's the end, we're buried alive.
Rose tried to stand, but her legs didn't work right. They felt like they belonged to somebody else. The knight hooked an arm under her elbow and lifted her, careful, steady. Rose swayed. Her boots slid slightly on wet grit, tracked in by dozens of panicked feet. Where? Rose started. Then the word broke. She swallowed hard. Where do I go? The knight turned her toward the corridor's interior, away from the sealed gate, away from daylight, and the last chance of seeing Pine again.
With me.
He said. A second knight stepped close, visor turning toward Rose's back like a compass needle. Rose felt the attention without seeing it.
Her coat rode up at the gate.
The second knight muttered, low enough that most people could not hear. The first knight answered, even lower.
I saw.
Rose's stomach tightened. She clutched her scarf and tried to shrink inside her hood. They moved her forward. The bunker corridor narrowed as they left the gate area. The crowd thinned slightly, but the air got hotter, thicker, because here, people had stopped running and started waiting. Waiting made fear ferment. A wall speaker crackled. A voice came through, distorted but recognizable, the same tone as the street broadcasts.
Meadwin Coinwave Emergency Band. Timestamp October 1st, year 22137. Airstrike advisory remains active. All bunker residents remain inside. Screening points are suspended until further notice. Medical triage begins immediately. Repeat, triage begins immediately.
The speaker popped with static. Then the voice added something that made the corridor tighten like a fist.
Fever protocol is in effect.
Rose felt Levy's earlier dread rise up inside her like a bad taste. People murmured at once. The word fever moved through the bunker like a rumor with teeth. What fever? I heard it's in the South Coin camps. 99 out of 100. No cure. Don't let them near your kids. A woman hissed, keep your mouth shut, and pulled her child closer. Rose's lungs seized. She tried to breathe quietly. She tried to keep her thoughts quiet like Levy had told her, even though she still didn't fully understand what that meant. The knights guided Rose around a bend and into a side corridor where the noise dropped from screaming to a lower, constant roar. There were cots lined up against the wall. Some were occupied by people with bandaged heads. Broken arms splintered with scrapboards, eyes wide and unfocused. A medic moved down the line with a bag of supplies and a face that looked carved out of fatigue. As Rose passed, a man on a cot lifted his head, his gaze caught on Rose's hood, then her scarf. Then, for a split second, the edge of her ear, where the fabric had slipped during the run. The man's eyes widened like he'd seen a ghost. He whispered, barely audible, "Elf." Rose froze. Her whole body locked so hard it hurt. The knight nearest her stepped between Rose and the cot, blocking the man's view with armor.
That word stays in your head,
the knight said, voice flat and dangerous. The man's mouth worked. I didn't mean... The knight cut him off.
You didn't see anything.
Rose's hands shook. She yanked the scarf higher until it scraped her cheeks. She could barely breathe, but she did it anyway. A few feet away, a woman with a bruised face saw the exchange and narrowed her eyes. Her gaze flicked to Rose, then to the speaker that had mentioned fever protocol, then back to Rose again. Suspicion bloomed in her expression like mold. Rose felt it and wanted to run, but the corridor was full. There was nowhere to go except deeper. The knights kept moving her. They pushed through a heavy door into a smaller room that looked like an old storage bay. The ceiling was lower. The lights were dimmer, tinted red in places where emergency strips had kicked in. A table sat in the center with maps spread across it, pinned down by metal tools. Radios hissed and cracked. A few knights were there, helmets on, heads close, voices clipped. The moment Rose entered, the room's attention shifted. A knight at the table looked up, visor turning.
Is that the kid?
She's the kid.
The first knight answered. Another knight, older by posture, if not by visible age, stepped closer. He didn't crowd Rose, he just looked at her carefully, like he was trying to see something through fabric and fear. Rose stared back, trembling. She wanted to scream at him to go outside and find Pine. She wanted to grab his armor and shake him until he promised. She did neither. Her throat wouldn't cooperate. The older knight spoke to the knight who had carried her, voice low.
Any injuries?
Shock, dust, no visible blood. Adult female down outside the gate zone. Adult male stayed behind.
Rose flinched at the phrase "stayed behind." It sounded too neat, too clean for what it meant. The older knight's voice softened slightly, then hardened again as he returned to duty.
We'll move her to inner holding. She can't be in general triage with fever protocol active. People will tear her apart with rumors.
Rose heard that and felt cold rush through her stomach, tear her apart with rumors. She didn't know if he meant words or hands. A boom hit the bunker again. Stronger. The room's lights flickered. A shelf rattled. Dust fell in a thicker sheet this time. Someone swore under their breath. A radio on the table crackled with a voice Rose couldn't place. Fast and urgent.
Gate 3 exterior took a near hit. Debris on approach. Air raid still active. We have structural tremor in Corridor 1. Repeat, tremor.
The older knight answered into his radio, calm like calm was a weapon.
Seal bulkhead 2 if tremor becomes crack. Keep civilians away from Corridor 1. Move triage deeper. Confirm.
Static, then the reply.
Confirm.
Rose's body started shaking harder. Her mind kept trying to picture the street outside, the van, Levy on the ground, Pine fighting with bound hands, the falling whistle, the blast. Her brain replayed it, like if she replayed it enough, she could find the moment to fix. Fix. Rose's eyes squeezed shut. For a split second, she tried again. The same useless attempt as before. Make it different. Make it different. Nothing changed. The bunker still smelled like metal and fear. The radios still hissed. The bombs still made the walls flinch. Rose's breath hitched. A sob tried to climb out of her chest. She swallowed it hard. The older knight turned away from Rose and leaned toward another knight at the table, voice low enough to be private. You saw her back. I saw the mark, the other knight replied. A pause. The older knight's tone dropped even further, like the words were dangerous.
That ring and flame, that is Halvareth lore.
The other knight answered, skeptical but careful. Or a scaver's brand to sell a story. The older knight made a sound that was half disgust, half worry.
Center spine, clean, old. That is not a street brand.
Rose stood very still. She pretended not to hear. She couldn't stop hearing. The younger knight leaned in, voice like gravel. You think she has his blood? The older knight didn't answer directly. He watched Rose's hood, her scarf, the way she was trembling with no room left inside her for bravery. He murmured,
Blood remembers, even when people don't.
Rose didn't know what that meant, but it made her skin prickle under her coat. A sharp crack echoed down the corridor outside the room. Not a bomb, a gunshot. Inside the bunker. Everyone in the storage bay froze. Rose's heart slammed. Another crack followed, closer, then shouting, "Get back! Stop pushing! Move the line!" A woman screamed, high and wild. Someone yelled, "She's infected!" Rose's stomach dropped so fast, it felt like falling. The older knight snapped into motion.
Gate corridor,
He barked.
go.
Two knights rushed past Rose toward the door. Rose tried to move too, not toward the chaos, but away from it, away from the words infected and fever and elf that were starting to combine into something that could kill her even underground. Her boots stuck to the floor for a second. She couldn't move. She felt trapped inside her own skin. The knight who had carried her turned and grabbed her shoulders gently but firmly.
Rose,
He said, using her name like a rope.
look at me.
Rose looked up. His visor hid his face, but his voice was human behind it.
You are staying here.
He said.
Do you understand?
Rose shook her head hard, tears spilling now in spite of her efforts. They're going to hurt me. The knight didn't lie. He didn't say nobody would. He said,
We won't let them.
The shouting outside swelled. Boots pounded. The bunker's panic wave moved like a living thing. A man's voice screamed, "My kid's coughing." Another voice shouted back, "Get him away from us." A medic yelled, "Everyone shut up and sit down." Then another gunshot cracked, followed by a heavy thud that sounded like someone hitting the floor. Rose flinched so hard her scarf slid. She yanked it back into place, hands shaking violently. The older knight swore under his breath and moved toward the door, but he stopped and looked back at Rose like he was making a decision. He pointed.
Inner holding, now, before the crowd connects the fever word to her.
Rose didn't want inner holding. It sounded like a cage, but the shouting outside sounded like worse. The knight who had carried Rose lifted her again, not like a child this time, but like someone evacuating a fragile, vital thing through fire. Rose clutched his shoulder plate, fingers digging into armor. They pushed through a side door into a narrower passage. The air here was colder. The lights were fewer. It smelled like unused concrete and old damp. They moved quickly. Behind them, the bunker shook again. A heavier tremor and a distant metallic groan ran through the structure like a warning. Rose heard someone yelling far away, voice distorted by walls and panic. The doors cracked. A night voice shouted back,
That's a lie. Keep moving.
Rose's chest tightened. She pictured the big bunker door, the only thing between her and the bombs. She pictured it bending. She pictured it giving way. The narrow passage opened into a smaller chamber with thick bulkhead doors. A few cots, a metal cabinet, a single emergency light that hummed. The knight set Rose down gently. Rose's knees buckled, and she sat on the floor anyway. She curled in on herself, arms wrapped around her legs, hood down, scarf still up, trying to keep herself small enough that the world would miss her. The knight stood in the doorway like a guard post. Outside, the bunker's noise continued. Shouts, boots, radios. Somewhere, a medic sobbed once, fast and quiet, then swallowed it. Rose whispered into her scarf, voice barely there. The World Defense Force will save us, right? The question hung in the cold little chamber and sounded ridiculous the moment it left her mouth. The knight didn't answer for a long beat. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired and honest.
Right now,
He said.
it's just us.
Another boom rolled through the bunker wall. The emergency light flickered. Dust drifted from a seam above Rose's head. And from somewhere deeper, behind thick doors, Rose heard the new kind of sound that made her blood run cold. Metal grinding, a bulkhead shifting, a structure under stress. Something in the bunker was moving that was never supposed to move.
Part 8. Fever words, a crowd with teeth, and the door that starts to lose its promise. The grinding sound came again. Low. Slow. Not loud enough to be obvious to the panicked crowd, but loud enough that a knight who lived inside structures could hear it and feel his stomach drop. Rose heard it too, because in the small inner chamber, the bunker's noises arrived filtered, stripped down to essentials. The shouting outside was muffled. The thunder of distant impacts was a deep, constant pulse. The grinding cut through both like a blade. The knight in the doorway stiffened. His visor angled upward toward the ceiling seam, then toward the bulkhead hinges, as if he could read stress through metal. Rose hugged her knees tighter until her ribs hurt. She couldn't stop shaking. She kept seeing Levy's back, blood spreading. She kept seeing Pine's eyes, desperate, telling her to live. She kept hearing the whistling fall, and now she heard the bunker itself making a sound like it was reconsidering its own strength. Outside the chamber, a radio crackled and popped. Voices came through in short bursts, distorted by concrete.
Tremor. Corridor 1. Hairline crack. Move civilians deeper. Fever protocol breach at triage.
The last phrase was followed by a shout. Not through radio this time, but through the corridor itself. A real human voice, echoing down the bunker passage. "They're hiding one." Rose's stomach turned to ice. The knight in the doorway snapped his head toward the corridor. His hand went to the rifle slung at his chest, not raising it, but ready. Another shout followed. Closer now. "I saw the ear!" Rose's breath stopped. A third voice, a woman's voice, sharp and panicked. 99 out of 100! You want us all dead!" Rose pressed her forehead into her knees. The scarf rubbed her cheeks raw. She couldn't breathe well, but she didn't dare loosen it. The knight spoke into his radio, low and controlled.
Inner holding compromised. Crowd moving. Need 2 to seal corridor.
Static answered, then a clipped reply.
On the way. Hold.
Boots pounded somewhere. Not the measured run of knights, but the messy stampede of civilians who had stopped being citizens and started being a mob. Rose heard fists hitting a door down the corridor. Metal clanged. A man screamed something unintelligible. Then a gunshot cracked again, closer than before, followed by silence so thick Rose could taste it. A night voice shouted, furious.
Everyone back. Back now.
The mob answered with noise. Angry noise. Fearful noise. "Open the door! Let us see her. She's infected. Kill it!" The last word landed in Rose's mind like a punch. Kill it. Rose squeezed her eyes shut and tried to make herself invisible. The knight in the doorway shifted his stance, widening his feet slightly, blocking the entrance fully now. He spoke without turning his head, voice low and fast, directed at Rose.
Listen to me,
he said.
Do what I say. No questions.
Rose's voice came out tiny. They're going to...
They're not.
The knight cut in, not because he was sure, but because he needed Rose to obey.
Move to the back wall. Stay low.
Rose crawled, hands trembling, toward the back of the chamber. Her gloves scraped concrete. She could feel dust under her nails. She pressed herself into the corner like a child trying to disappear inside a wall. The knight's radio crackled again, urgent.
Bulkhead 2 shifting. Airstrike continued. Gate 3 exterior is holding, but...
Static swallowed the rest.
Another boom rolled through the bunker and made the emergency light flicker. The flicker turned shadows into things that moved. The pounding outside grew louder. A voice yelled, right outside the inner chamber now. "She's in there!" Rose's heart hammered so hard it made her nauseous. A fist slammed into the bulkhead door. Metal rang. Rose flinched. The knight didn't move. He stayed in the doorway, body angled so if the door failed, his armor would meet the crowd first. He spoke loud enough to carry.
This area is restricted. Back away.
A man shouted back, voice frantic and hateful. "You're hiding a fever carrier. You're hiding an elf." The word elf bounced off concrete like a thrown rock. Rose's stomach twisted. She clutched her scarf so tight, her fingers went numb. The knight's voice turned colder.
You will. Back away.
A different voice. Closer, a woman sobbing. "My boy's coughing and you're hiding a carrier." What are the knights doing? What are they doing? The sentence Rose had heard in her own head now came out of a stranger's mouth. That made it worse. It meant everybody was breaking in the same place. The crowd surged. Rose could hear the scrape of bodies pushing, the sound of shoes slipping on wet grit. The door groaned. The knight raised his rifle, not aiming at the crowd's faces, but at the floor in front of them. A warning without words.
Back,
he ordered. Someone screamed, "He's going to shoot us!" Someone else yelled, "He already shot someone!" The crowd's fear turned into anger faster. That is what crowds do. Fear needs a target. The bulkhead door took another hit. The metal hinge creaked. Rose pressed her palms over her ears for a second, then remembered her scarf and forced her hands back down. She needed her hands free. She didn't know why. She just felt it. The knight spoke into his radio again, voice tight now.
They're about to breach. Where am I to?
A reply came, faint and clipped.
30 seconds.
30 seconds might as well be forever when you can hear the door starting to complain. The bunker shuddered again. A deeper tremor ran through the floor, like the ground itself coughed. The grinding sound returned, louder now. The bulkhead overhead, somewhere deeper in the structure, moved again, metal dragging. Someone in the crowd screamed, "The bunker's cracking! We're going to die in here!" The mob surged harder. The door buckled a fraction inward. Rose's breath came out in a broken gasp. Her mind did something strange. It reached for the earlier test, the insurgent's whisper in her ear. Think. Make it happen. Rose didn't believe she could. She had proven she couldn't. She had tried, and nothing changed. But her body didn't care about belief anymore. Her body was a trapped animal, and it was searching for any exit, even impossible ones. Rose squeezed her eyes shut and thought, stop. Stop the door. Stop the crowd. Stop the bunker shaking. Stop the bombs. Her heart hammered. Her fingers dug into the scarf. She felt heat at the base of her spine for a split second, a phantom warmth, like a bruise remembering a hand that hit it. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. The door still groaned. The crowd still shouted. The bunker still trembled. Rose's eyes snapped open, tears spilling. She whispered, broken. Please. The bulkhead door suddenly slammed outward. Rose screamed, certain it had failed. But it hadn't failed. It had opened. Two knights rushed in from the corridor, pushing the crowd back with sheer armored mass. One of them shoved the bulkhead door shut again with enough force that it rang, then locked it with a heavy clank. The pounding continued on the other side, but the door held. For a moment, the inner chamber went quiet, except for Rose's sobbing breaths. The knights inside the room shifted fast, efficient. One knelt beside Rose, visor close.
Rose Helveth,
He said, voice quick.
you hurt?
Rose shook her head. She couldn't answer properly. The knight reached carefully toward her scarf, then stopped himself like he remembered fever protocol, remembered rumor teeth. He lowered his hand.
Can you stand?
Rose tried. Her legs wobbled. She stood anyway because kneeling felt like dying.
The older knight from earlier stepped into the chamber, shoulders tense.
We have to relocate her. Crowd is tracking. Triage is compromised.
One of the new knights nodded. Where?
Service route to inner vault corridor.
The older knight said.
We move now.
Rose's brain snagged on the word vault.
Inner vault corridor sounded like a deeper cage. It also sounded like thick doors. Thick doors sounded like the only thing in the world that still meant safety.
Rose's voice came out ragged.
My dad.
The older knight's visor
Angled down at her, and for a heartbeat, Rose thought he might lie just to keep her moving.
He didn't.
We have exterior teams,
he said.
Right now, the air raid is still active. We can't open the gate. We can't send more out.
Rose's breath hitched.
So he's...
The knight didn't finish the sentence. He only said,
Move.
Rose's legs wanted to collapse again,
but the knights started guiding her, one on each side, hands hovering near her shoulders without gripping unless they had to. They moved her like she was fragile and valuable at the same time, and Rose hated both feelings.
They pushed through a
Side hatch in the chamber wall and into a narrow service corridor. This corridor was older, rougher, less lit. Pipes ran along the ceiling and dripped. The air was colder here, damp enough to sting Rose's throat.
Behind them,
The mob's pounding was muffled again, but the noise followed. The bunker carried sound like a body carries pain.
as they moved,
Another boom rolled through the structure. The corridor lights flickered. A pipe overhead rattled and dripped faster.
Rose flinched.
Is the bunker?
The knight closest to her answered,
Voice steady, but too fast.
It's holding.
Then, quieter, to the older knight, a private mutter.
For now.
They reached a junction
Where the service corridor met a larger reinforced hallway. A thick sign was bolted to the wall, old paint chipped. It read,
Vault access.
Authorized only.
A metal door stood ahead,
Thicker than the others, with a wheel lock. Two knights spun the wheel fast, muscles straining. The door opened with a groan.
As Rose stepped through.
She caught another burst of radio chatter from a knight's shoulder unit.
Gate 3 exterior. Rubble. We have bodies. We have one adult male still engaging hostiles near burned van.
Rose's head snapped up.
Adult male?
The knight carrying the radio paused a fraction.
Another knight, sharp and practical, snapped,
Move!
but Rose clung to the fragment like it was oxygen. Adult male, still engaging.
That could be Pine.
It could also be someone else.
Rose's heart,
Hammered anyway.
she whispered.
Dad?
The older knight
Turned his helmet slightly toward another knight beside him as they moved through the vault corridor. His voice dropped low, private again, like he was speaking around Rose's ears rather than into them.
She's Helveth.
he murmured.
Have Helvereth line. But the mark.
The other knight replied, cautious.
Could be coincidence.
The older knight's tone sharpened.
Coincidence doesn't burn itself center spine. That brand is story level.
Rose walked between them.
Trembling, catching only pieces, but each piece felt like a thread tugging at her back.
They moved deeper. The vault corridor was smoother,
Cleaner. Thick walls, fewer seams, less dust. The air felt more controlled, like the bunker's heart was here.
but even here,
The bombing made the walls pulse. And now, a new sound came. Faint, but unmistakable through all the concrete.
screaming. Not inside. Outside.
A long distance scream that cut through vents and echoes, carried down like a ghost.
Rose's body jerked.
She stopped walking. The knight stopped too, but only for a second. The older knight's voice came firm.
Rose, keep moving.
Rose's voice cracked.
That's outside.
The older knight,
Didn't deny it.
Yes.
Rose's eyes filled again. She tried to swallow. She couldn't.
she whispered.
The World Defense Force will save us, right? The older knight's silence was answer enough.
Then he said something else.
Quieter, to the knight beside him. Something Rose wasn't supposed to hear.
Seal the inner vault. If the gate fails, we hold her here.
Hold her here. Rose shivered.
The bunker was becoming a mouth. It was swallowing her and sealing behind her, protecting her, trapping her.
They reached another heavy door.
This one had 2 knights stationed already, rifles slung, faces hidden behind visors. They stepped aside when they saw the escort, then moved back into position.
The older knight
Spoke a code phrase. The door unlocked.
Rose stepped into a small inner room
with benches and a metal cabinet and a single dim light. It felt like a holding cell, but without bars. The bars were the bunker itself. The knights closed the door behind her. The lock clanked. Rose turned and stared at the door, breath ragged. She pressed her palm to the cold metal.
On the other side was the bunker.
The mob, the fear, the bombs, and somewhere beyond all of that, Pine.
Rose's voice came out as a whisper.
That sounded too small for the world's noise.
Dad, please, the bunker answered
With another deep tremor, and somewhere far above, metal groaned again like a tired spine.
Part 9.
The inner vault, the mob that does not forget, and the radio that finally says the word, down.
Rose kept her palm on the door
Until her skin went numb.
Cold metal.
A faint vibration from the bunker's bones. The distant thunder of bombs that had become a constant, like weather that hated you personally.
She pressed her forehead to the door too,
Hood brushing metal, scarf catching on the edge of her cheek. Her breath fogged the surface in weak bursts.
Dad, she whispered again,
Because saying it out loud felt like the only way to keep him existing.
no answer. Only the bunker's low groan.
Somewhere far above, a sound like a stressed beam complaining.
Rose slid down the door
Until she was sitting on the floor.
The inner room was small.
The light was dim. The air was controlled enough that it felt wrong, like the bunker was trying to pretend it was still the old world, still a place where concrete meant certainty.
Rose looked at her hands.
They were filthy. Dust and wet grit smeared across her gloves. Her knuckles were scraped. The skin under her nails was dark.
She tried to remember.
When her hands last smelled like soap,
The memory came and went too fast to hold.
from the other side of the door, muffled voices moved in short bursts. Knights. Close. Real. A steady rhythm in a place that had gone mad. Then a radio crackled through the wall, loud enough that Rose could hear individual words. Outer Corridor 2 is still restless. Fever protocol escalating. Crowd is calling her an elf. Rose flinched at that last word, even though she had known it was coming. She pressed her scarf tighter, as if fabric could erase language. A voice, older, came through next. The same older knight from before, Rose thought. The one whose tone had weight, like he had been holding cities together for too long.
Keep the corridor sealed.
The older knight said.
Keep the civilians away from the inner doors. If they get eyes on her again, we have a second crisis inside the first.
A younger knight replied.
Low and tense.
They already have eyes. They have stories now.
The older knight
answered without softness.
Then we keep the story contained.
Rose's stomach tightened. Story. She had become a story. A rumor. A reason. Outside, someone shouted again. Distant, but loud enough to travel through vents and hallways.
She's in there! The mob's voice.
Still alive. Still hungry.
A knight barked back.
Back away from that bulkhead.
Rose's breathing turned shallow. She could taste dust again, even here.
The bunker trembled lightly.
Not a full shockwave, more like a heavy cough. The overhead light flickered once, then held.
Rose stared at the light,
like it might decide to leave.
The door in front of her stayed shut.
The lock stayed firm.
She tried to swallow,
and found her throat too tight.
She forced herself to listen,
because listening felt like control. The voices outside shifted closer, then farther, like knights moving positions, tightening their ring. Then, quieter, the older knight spoke to someone right outside Rose's door. His voice dropped into a tone meant for a helmet-to-helmet exchange.
You saw the mark, clean.
A second voice answered,
Hesitant but honest.
Clean. Center spine. A ring. A flame.
A pause. The older knight said,
That ring is a Halvareth symbol from before the Ash Years, before the world got loud.
The other knight replied,
Or a cult brand.
The older knight's voice hardened.
Cult brands are sloppy. That one is precise.
A third voice joined in, even lower. Rose heard only pieces at first.
Halveth line, half Halvareth descent. And she's young.
Then the older knight said the line Rose caught clearly, because it sounded like a warning tucked into a whisper.
If she carries Heath's blood, even a thin thread, we do not let this bunker turn her into a casualty.
Rose's stomach flipped. Heath. The name hit Rose
like the first cold drop of rain before a storm. She did not know why it mattered, only that the knights spoke it like a person you did not speak lightly, like a piece of history you said with care.
Rose whispered into her scarf,
Barely audible, "Who is Heath?"
The bunker did not answer.
A radio crackled again, louder now. The sound had urgency in it, the kind that made knights stop talking mid-sentence.
Gate 3 exterior update.
Rose's heart slammed, and she pressed herself closer to the door, as if she could pull the radio signal through metal with her body.
The voice on the radio continued,
chopped by static, then clear, then chopped again.
Burned van zone. We have 2 hostiles down. 1 hostile fled into South Coin rubble.
Rose's breath hitched.
Burned van zone. That was them. That was where Levy had fallen.
Then the voice said the phrase Rose had been waiting for
and dreading at the same time.
Adult male is down.
Rose went still.
The room tightened around her.
Her ears rang,
even without a bomb, because the sentence had become its own explosion.
Adult male
is down.
Rose's throat opened and shut,
and nothing came out at first.
Outside the door,
knights answered in clipped bursts.
Confirm identity.
Static. Then the reply, heavier.
Unable to confirm visually. Male, bound wrists, fought on approach, took shrapnel in a follow-up shot. No movement. Repeat, no movement.
Rose made a sound then. A thin, broken sound that did not resemble a word. It scraped out of her like a confession.
She crawled forward until her forehead hit the door again.
"Dad," she whispered. Her hands shook so hard, her fingers slid on metal.
She tried to stand.
Her legs refused. She tried again. They wobbled. She stayed upright by leaning her whole body into the door, like the door was the only thing in the world strong enough to hold her. Outside, the older knight's voice tightened. The calm was still there, but it had a sharper edge now.
Pull exterior teams back. Air activity is still present. We can't lose more for one body.
One of the younger knights snapped, voice angry.
That is somebody's father.
The older knight replied,
quiet and brutal.
I know.
Rose's vision blurred with tears. She clenched her jaw until it hurt, trying to keep from screaming, because screaming felt like it would make the truth more real.
Her mind fought. It insisted
the radio could be wrong.
It insisted Pine
could stand up again.
It insisted
the bunker door could open, and she could run and find him, breathing.
But the older knight's next words
killed that fantasy with a kind of mercy.
Mark the location. We retrieve when the air stops.
Retrieve.
Not rescue. Rose slid down again, back to the floor, and hugged her knees so tight she could barely breathe. The scarf pressed against her mouth and soaked up her sobs. She shook and shook and shook. A new sound cut in then, faint but unmistakable.
A cough. Not outside the room, inside.
Rose froze so hard it felt like her spine locked.
The cough came again.
Soft, dry. It sounded like it belonged to a person who had been breathing dust for too long.
Rose's head snapped up. The room was empty. She was alone. There was no one else in the chamber. The cough came again. From the vent. A metal vent grill on the far wall, low to the floor, just above the base of the concrete. Rose stared at it. Breath stuck in her throat. The cough came again, followed by a weak scrape, like fabric against metal. A voice whispered from the vent, too quiet to be a normal call, but clear enough that Rose felt her skin crawl. Rose! Rose's whole body went ice. She didn't answer. She couldn't. The vent whispered again, and this time the voice carried a thin, strained impatience, like someone trying to keep their tone steady while bleeding. Rose, don't scream! Rose's hands flew to her scarf, gripping it tight. Her eyes darted to the door, to the lock, to the emergency light. Her mind tried to decide if she was imagining it. Then the voice came again, and it sounded close enough to touch. Little flame? Rose's stomach lurched at the phrase. She had heard the insurgent earlier call her special in the van. She had heard Knights whisper about a ring and flame. Now, someone in the vent was calling her Little Flame, like it was a private nickname. Her chest tightened. She crawled toward the vent without choosing to. Her body moved on instinct, drawn by the possibility that a voice could mean life. She stopped a foot away, trembling. "Who are you?" she whispered. The voice in the vent breathed out, a ragged exhale. "Friend." Rose's voice shook. "My dad is—" The voice cut in softly, almost angry. "I know." Rose's eyes burned. "How?" A pause. Then the voice whispered, very low. "I heard it on their radios. Same way you did." Rose's heart hammered harder. That meant someone was inside the bunker system, inside the vents, inside the controlled space that was supposed to be safe. Rose's mind flashed to the mob, to the word infected, to fever protocol. She whispered, "Are you sick?" The voice in the vent made a sound that was half laugh, half cough. "Everybody's sick, kid." Rose flinched. The cough sounded worse now, wetter at the end. Her stomach tightened again. The voice steadied itself and whispered, "They're coming." Rose's head snapped toward the door. "The Knights," the voice whispered. "No, them." Rose's blood turned cold. The pounding started again, far off at first, then nearer, then heavier. Not on Rose's door. On the inner vault corridor bulkhead, somewhere beyond it. A mob wave, reorganizing, moving, learning routes. And underneath that, a different rhythm. Boots that were not panicked. Boots that were purposeful. Rose heard it through the vent, through the bunker's bones. A knight outside Rose's door barked something into his radio. Urgent.
Inner vault corridor. I have movement on the service run. Confirm, confirm. I have movement.
Static spit back. Then a reply came, sharp.
That corridor is supposed to be sealed!
The knight outside snapped.
It isn't.
Rose's breath hitched. She stared at the vent. Who are they? The voice in the vent whispered, thinner now, like it was struggling to stay conscious. Ashgarth inside. Rose's stomach dropped. Inside the bunker. Inside the safe place. The voice added, barely audible. They followed the kid. They always follow stories. Rose's hands shook so hard she had to press them flat against the floor to stop them from flailing. Then, outside Rose's door, the older knight's voice rang out, loud enough to carry through metal.
Lockdown inner vault. Full seal. Now.
A heavy mechanical clank echoed down the corridor, distant but powerful. Another clank followed, the sound of thick doors engaging, one after another, like the bunker was closing its fists. The emergency light in Rose's chamber flickered and dimmed, then brightened again. A power reroute, a final measure. Rose heard a faint hiss from the vent beside her.
air shifting.
The voice inside whispered,
Urgent now, almost a hiss.
"Rose,
Listen, if they open that door, you do one thing.
Rose's eyes went wide.
What? The voice paused, like it was choosing words carefully.
"Keep your scarf up,"
It whispered, and the familiarity of that rule made Rose's chest ache.
Then it added something
Rose had never heard from anyone else in her life, spoken like a secret, passed down through blood.
"And keep your mind quiet."
Some people can hear thoughts when the world is breaking.
Rose stared at the vent.
Shaking. I can't.
The voice in the vent breathed.
Ragged. You can. You just don't know you can.
Outside,
The pounding grew louder.
a heavy impact
Hit a bulkhead somewhere down the corridor. Metal rang. Someone shouted. Another impact followed.
Rose heard the older knight snap an order.
Stack up. Cover the hinge.
Then, closer than Rose wanted, a different sound.
A tool against metal. A pry. A deliberate attempt
To open what was supposed to stay shut.
Rose pressed her back against the wall beside the vent,
Eyes locked on the door.
The bunker trembled again,
Deeper this time, and somewhere far above, a heavy groan rolled through the structure like a warning that the roof itself was tired.
The voice in the vent
Whispered one last time, barely there.
"Here they come, Part 10.
The inner vault holds, the sky finishes its argument, and Rose learns what after feels like.
The first sound,
Was metal being persuaded,
a pry tool,
biting under a seam. A squeal, small but vicious, like the bunker was protesting the idea of being opened. The sound carried down the inner corridor and through Rose's door as a thin, sharp ache.
Rose stayed pressed against the wall beside the vent,
Knees bent, boots flat, scarf pulled high enough that it tugged at her cheeks. Her hood shadowed her eyes, but her eyes were wide and fixed on the door.
She could not stop shaking. She tried to keep her mind
Quiet, the way the vent voice had told her.
She tried to make her thoughts small, but grief was loud inside her.
The grief kept yelling her father's name. It kept showing her Lavi's coat, blooming dark. It kept replaying the moment the door sealed, and the sky still kept dropping fire, like the city was just a target outline.
Outside,
The older knight's voice cut through the corridor, hard and sharp.
Back away from the door. You are in a restricted vault. Identify.
no reply.
Only another scrape of metal on metal. Another pry. Slower now, confident, like the person on the other side knew the tools they had and the time they could steal.
A younger knight's voice
Snapped, close to the door.
They're not civilians.
The older knight answered, cold.
I know.
A radio crackled with frantic bursts.
Movement on service run confirmed. 2, possibly 3. Armed. 1 has breaching tools.
Static.
Then
Hold. Air raid still active. Inner vault seal is priority.
the bunker trembled, a deep vibration that made the emergency light buzz. Dust sifted from a hairline seam in the ceiling and drifted down in a slow, lazy fall, as if gravity was the only calm thing left. Rose stared at the dust. It looked harmless. It never was. Dust was what stayed behind.
The vent
Hissed softly beside her. The voice from earlier was gone now, or too weak to speak again. Only the hush of airflow remained, cold against the back of her neck.
Rose pressed one hand to her scarf
And the other to the concrete wall, grounding herself. The concrete was cold. It felt older than the war, older than October. It felt like something built with the belief that the world would continue.
The squeal at the door stopped.
Silence fell, sudden and heavy.
Rose's stomach tightened.
Silence like that never meant safety. It meant the next sound was being chosen. Then, the next sound arrived, a sharp series of knocks.
Not fists.
The flat, controlled tap of a tool testing metal.
A voice came through the door,
Muffled, calm, and wrong. in a bunker full of panic.
Open up!
The older knight answered immediately, voice like stone.
You're on the wrong side of a gun.
The voice on the other side laughed softly. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the laugh of someone who wasn't afraid. "We're all on the wrong side of something," the voice replied. "Open it." A second voice joined in, lower, with a rough edge. "We only need the kid. Don't make it messy." Rose's breath stopped. The kid. Her. She pressed her shoulder harder into the wall and tried to become part of it. Her fingers dug into the scarf so tight she felt the fabric stretch. The older knight spoke into his radio, clipped.
"They're confirming target. They're here for Rose. Engage on breach."
A reply snapped back.
Authorized. Do not let them enter inner chamber.
Rose heard boots shift right outside her door. Knights stacking. Armor plates scraping softly. Weapons being readied with controlled movements. The bunker shook again. Bigger this time. A heavy shudder that made the light flicker twice and made Rose's teeth click together. Outside the bunker, the sky was still arguing. Rose could hear it. Faint through layers of concrete, but clear enough to feel. Aircraft overhead, low enough that their roar pressed into the structure. The sound was not just a distant hum anymore. It was a presence, a moving weight. Rose pictured them without wanting to. Dark shapes, cutting through grey cloud. Wings slick with rain. Engines screaming. She had seen aircraft before as dots. Now, even underground, she could feel them like something large passing close over her own head. A radio voice from deeper in the bunker cut through the comm units, audible through the door in clipped fragments.
Air activity over South Coin and Lower Stone. 2 passes confirmed. Bombs continuing.
The older knight answered without taking his eyes off the door.
"Hold the vault. Gate stays sealed. Everybody stays in."
From the corridor beyond, a medic's voice shouted something frantic, muffled by distance.
They're trying to break through triage. They're calling her infected.
A night voice roared back.
Hold the line.
Rose's chest hurt. Her grief and fear were layered now, stacked like the bunker's doors. A mob outside the inner vault. Ashkarth inside the bunker. Bombs outside the city. The sky itself deciding how much of Midwin was allowed to exist. The voice beyond the door spoke again. Calm. Almost bored. "You knights always act like you own the future. You don't." The older knight's tone went colder.
"You're Ashkarth."
A pause. Then the voice said, pleased, "So you can still smell us." Rose's stomach twisted. The older knight didn't answer with words this time. Rose heard the click of a safety being moved, the slight shift of boots, a final alignment. Then the door took a hit, a heavy impact, not a gentle pry, a strike with weight behind it. Metal rang through the corridor like a bell. Rose flinched so hard, her back scraped concrete. Her breath ripped out of her in a sharp gasp. Another impact followed, closer, harder. A tool slamming into the lock seam. The older knight shouted,
"Now!"
Gunfire erupted. The sound was different inside a bunker. It didn't have room to spread. It became a violent, echoing roar that filled every inch of corridor and bounced back into Rose's chest. Rose covered her ears, then remembered the scarf, then did it anyway. Her hands pressed hard against fabric and hood, and still the noise hammered her skull. Shouts, a scream that cut off too fast, boots pounding. Metal clanging as someone fell into a bulkhead. The older knight barked orders between shots.
"Left! Cover left! Don't let them—"
Another boom rolled through the bunker. Bigger, much bigger. The whole room trembled. Rose's emergency light flickered and went dim for a heartbeat. The gunfire outside her door paused for half a second, not because anyone chose to stop, but because the structure itself had interrupted them. Rose felt dust fall across her hood. She tasted concrete grit.
Then the shooting resumed, sharper now, closer. A voice screamed outside, not a civilian's voice, not a knight's, an insurgent's voice. Pain and rage. "Get the door! Get—" A rifle cracked. The scream stopped. A new sound followed, heavy and wet. A body hitting the floor. Rose's stomach heaved. She swallowed hard until the bile backed down. The older knight's voice came through again, strained but controlled.
Hinge is compromised. They're pushing.
Rose pressed her back against the wall and tried to keep her mind quiet. 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 But her mind kept throwing images at her. Pine on his knees, bound, still swinging. Levy's breath, leaving in one long, silent release. The bunker door, grinding shut. Her father's last look. The roar overhead became louder again, even through concrete. A new pass. Planes dropping lower. Rose felt the pressure in her ribs, the way the air seemed to tense. She could almost see them in her mind. Aircraft in formation, cutting the grey like knives, their bellies opening. Dark shapes falling away. Bombs. A distant whistle began, not inside the bunker, outside, above the city. But Rose heard it through vents and seams, and the shared terror of hundreds of people holding their breath at once. The whistle grew. Rose's eyes widened. She could not stop imagining it. The bomb falling. The sky making a decision. The city underneath, waiting to be erased. The bomb hit. The bunker convulsed. Not a gentle tremor, a violent, full-body shudder that threw Rose sideways into the wall. Her shoulder slammed hard. Pain shot down her arm. The emergency light flickered wildly, then went out for a half-second. In that brief darkness, Rose heard pure panic outside her door. Knights, shouting. A woman screaming somewhere far off in the bunker. A child, sobbing so hard they sounded like they were choking. Then the lights snapped back on, dimmer than before, buzzing like an angry insect. Rose pushed herself upright, shaking. Outside her door, the firefight had changed. Less controlled. More chaotic. Someone was yelling, "Bulkhead 2 shifted." Another voice, loud and urgent, "We're losing Corridor 1." The older knight roared.
Hold this door.
A metallic screech followed, louder than the earlier pry. A hinge tearing. The inner vault door being forced in small increments. Rose stared at it, frozen. She could see the door's edge quiver slightly with each push from the other side. Then the door stopped quivering. It began to open. Just a fraction. A narrow gap at the seam. Rose's breath stopped completely. A sliver of corridor light cut into her chamber through the crack. A shape pressed into the gap. A hand, gloved, dark. Not a night glove, different, rougher. A hand that did not belong here. The older knight shouted,
Fire!
A shot cracked. The hand jerked back. Blood sprayed a thin arc that splattered the corridor floor. A voice screamed, furious, "Push anyway!" Rose's legs moved before her mind did. She stumbled backward, deeper into the chamber, hands shaking, scarf tight, mind screaming. The vent beside her hissed again, louder, like the airflow had changed. Like something in the bunker's lungs had shifted. Rose turned toward the vent, desperate, as if the vent could offer escape. It could not. The door crack widened again. Another shove. Another tool biting. Another hand reaching, more cautious this time. The older knight fired again. The corridor erupted with shouts and sparks. Rose did the only thing her body knew how to do. She thought, "Stop, stop, stop." She didn't think it like a wish. She thought it like a command, like she was screaming inside her skull with no sound. Stop the door. Stop the hands. Stop the bunker shaking. Stop the sky. For a split second, Rose felt that phantom heat again at the base of her spine, stronger this time. A pulse, a throb, a sensation like the mark on her back wasn't just ink or scar,
like it was a knot in her body, tied to something older and deeper.
Her visions swam. The emergency light buzzed louder. The door's metal groaned again. Then, suddenly, the corridor outside went quiet in a sharp, unnatural way. Not total silence. There were still distant screams, still radios, still the bunker's low groan. But right outside Rose's door, the struggle paused. Rose blinked, confused. The older knight's voice came through, lower now, strained.
They pulled back.
A younger knight whispered, disbelieving.
Why?
A radio crackled. A voice from deeper in the bunker shouting over everything.
Structural shift. Corridor 1 is collapsing. Repeat. Corridor 1 collapse. Everyone move.
The older knight swore.
They're not pulling back because they're scared of us. They're pulling back because the bunker is trying to bury them.
Rose's knees went weak. She slid down the wall again. Outside, knights shouted orders, boots pounding as they repositioned. Not chasing now, but retreating to avoid being crushed. The older knight yelled.
Seal! Seal it now!
A heavy clank rang out. Another lock engaged. Another mechanism turned. The inner vault door shuddered, and then, with a grinding protest, it shifted back into place. The crack disappeared. The door sealed. Rose stared at it like it was a miracle and a threat at the same time. Then the bunker shuddered again, and the sound that followed was different. A deep, rolling collapse. Concrete grinding. Metal snapping. A corridor somewhere giving up. The noise traveled through the bunker like a dying animal's last breath. People screamed. A radio voice shouted, frantic.
Corridor 1 is down. It's down. We lost.
Static swallowed the rest. Rose pressed her hands to her scarf and tried to breathe, but her lungs refused to fill properly. Panic made her chest small. A knight outside her door spoke, voice close, quieter now, like the fight had burned out and left only exhaustion.
It's over for that section.
Another knight replied, grim.
We sealed it. That's what matters.
Rose's voice came out in a whisper, thin and cracked. My dad is outside. Silence answered. Then the older knight's voice returned, close to the door, not through radio, just spoken to the knights in the corridor. His tone was tired, in a way Rose could feel.
We hold what we have. We don't reopen. Not today.
Rose's eyes burned. She pressed her forehead to her knees again, body trembling. The bombing outside began to fade, not because it ended, but because distance and time finally did what they always did. They turned violence into rumbling background. The aircraft roars passed farther away. The whistles came less often. The booms spaced out. Eventually, the bunker's tremors became smaller. People's screams became murmurs. Then, sobs. Then, in some corners, a stunned quiet. The bunker lights stabilized, but they stayed dim, as if the place knew bright light would be disrespectful. Rose stayed on the floor for a long time. She didn't know how long. Time inside a bunker was different. Time became the number of breaths you managed to take without breaking. Footsteps approached her door. The lock clanked softly. The older knight stepped into Rose's chamber. He removed his helmet. Rose saw a human face at last. A man with tired eyes, dirt smeared along his jaw, a small cut at his temple. He looked like someone who had been awake for too many days. He crouched a few feet away from Rose, not touching her, just making his body smaller so he didn't loom. His voice came out quiet.
Rose.
Rose didn't lift her head at first. He waited. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red and swollen, her scarf damp with tears. The knight held her gaze gently, then spoke carefully, like each word had weight.
We held the gate. We held the vault. The airstrike is easing. We are still here.
Rose's voice was barely sound. My mom. The knight's eyes tightened.
I'm sorry.
Rose swallowed hard. My dad. The knight's jaw clenched.
He didn't lie. He didn't soften it. He only said,
He kept you moving.
Rose's chest cracked open at that. She let out a sound that was halfway between a sob and a gasp. The knight stayed still, letting the grief happen, because there was no fixing it now, only enduring it. A radio in the corridor outside crackled with a calmer voice than before, a voice that sounded like it had gone hoarse from shouting.
Air activity decreasing. Report casualties. Begin head count. Begin ration distribution.
The bunker was shifting from emergency to aftermath, from screams to lists, from bodies on the street to names on paper. Rose wiped her face with her sleeve, smearing dust and tears together. The knight watched her, then spoke, softer now, like he was offering a thread of meaning in a place that had lost most of it.
I heard them talk about your family name,
He said.
Haveth.
Rose blinked. So, the knight hesitated. Then he continued, low and deliberate.
There are old lines in Midwin. Old blood that survives when it shouldn't.
Rose stared at him, confused. What are you saying? The knight's eyes flicked briefly toward Rose's back, toward the hidden mark beneath fabric. He didn't ask to see it. He didn't touch. He treated it like a private scar. He said,
There are stories about a man who didn't age. A man who held things shut that were trying to tear open. A man whose mark looked like a ring around a dark flame.
Rose's breath caught. The knight's voice stayed quiet.
If you carry any of that, even a thin thread, then you are going to need to be stronger than this bunker.
Rose's throat tightened. I'm just a kid. The knight nodded once. Slow.
Right now you are.
He stood, slowly, and offered his hand, palm open, not grabbing, not forcing. Rose stared at the hand for a long time. Then she reached up and took it. His glove was warm against her cold fingers. He helped her stand. Rose swayed, then steadied. She held her scarf in place with her free hand, like it was a lifeline. The knight guided her toward the door. As they stepped into the corridor, Rose saw the bunker for what it was now. A place full of people sitting on the floor, staring at walls, holding each other, whispering names, trying to understand which parts of the world still existed. A place where the air smelled like smoke filtered through vents and human sweat soaked into concrete. A place where no one spoke loudly anymore, because loud felt like inviting the sky back. Rose looked down the corridor toward the sealed gate that she could not see from here. She pictured it. Thick metal, locked. A final line between her and everything she had lost. The knight paused beside her, and for a moment he didn't sound like a soldier. He sounded like a man standing at the edge of a new era with no map. His voice came out low.
It's gone,
he said. Rose's chest tightened. She swallowed. The knight continued, voice breaking slightly, as if the words were cutting him too.
Everything is gone. The world is over. But we are what is left. We will survive. We will endure.